Chapter 37-25. She walked over to Xianyuan Mo's side and sat down. She held his hand and gently stroked his belly. Mose, can you feel it? Our child. Although I don't have any news about the ancient golden lotus, I'll try other methods. Once I've gathered all the spiritual herbs, I'll try to refine a pill that can expel the black lotus energy from your body. She spoke softly and told him her plan. Although she didn't know if the pill could be successfully refined, or if the pill could expel the black lotus energy from his body and wake him up, she had to try no matter what. She raised her eyes and looked in front of her. She saw a faint golden light emerging from the spirit spring and was slightly surprised. She got up and walked over to the spirit spring. When she arrived at the spirit spring, she couldn't help but stare in astonishment at the tiny golden lotus leaf that had grown out of the spirit spring. Strange, why is there a golden lotus leaf? She murmured softly and stared in astonishment at the fingernail-sized golden lotus leaf. The spirit spring water came naturally from this space. The spirit spring water was rich in spiritual energy and the water had the ability to purify itself. Even if one was injured and soaked in it, their injuries would heal faster. Furthermore, after being purified the next day, the water would be as clear as before and could be drunk. However, there had never been anything floating in the spirit spring, let alone a tiny golden lotus leaf. A golden lotus leaf? She was stunned and couldn't help but think of the golden lotus seed that Mo Chen had left behind and tossed into the spirit spring water. Although the golden lotus that she had obtained from the stairway to immortality was precious, it was not an ancient golden lotus. However, it contained a wisp of the ancient golden lotus's aura. Back then, when she had moved the golden lotus into the space to plant it, the lotus seeds had also been kept and given away. However, the golden lotus leaves that she had obtained back then were only ordinary lotus leaves, unlike the tiny golden lotus leaf in front of her. Her eyes flashed as she stared at the fingernail-sized golden lotus leaf. The tiny ray of light reflected by the golden lotus leaf was extremely beautiful. If it could grow bigger, how beautiful would it be? However, from what she knew, the leaves of the ancient golden lotus were golden in color. So why would the lotus seed that she had thrown into the spiritual spring grow such a golden lotus leaf? She reached out and picked up the golden lotus leaf, holding it in her palm. There were no roots or branches, just a tiny golden lotus leaf. Putting the golden lotus leaf back into the spirit spring water, she pondered for a while and collected her thoughts. Forget it, if he couldn't figure it out, then he wouldn't think about it. When she returned to Xianyuan Mo's side, she took his pulse. Her brows were slightly furrowed, and her expression was somewhat dignified. His body had been in a deep slumber all this time. Coupled with the black lotus energy in his body, the more time passed, the more unfavorable it would be for his body. If it weren't for her pill protecting his heart meridians, he probably wouldn't have been able to keep his life. Originally, she only planned to put him in this space, but after checking his condition today, she had no choice but to make a decision. She would use the 1,000-year chilling ice bed to suppress the black lotus energy in his body and put his body into a dormant state. Chapter 37-26. She used her divine sense to control everything in the space and moved the ice bed out from its corner. She moved Xianyuan Mo's onto it, then took out a medicinal pill from the space and fed it to Xianyuan Mo's. She then took out silver needles and sealed all the major acupuncture points on his body. After doing all this, she gently exhaled and glanced at Xianyuan Mo's. Then she flashed out of the space and returned to her room to rest. 3 days later Fengjiu woke up early because today was the day of the final competition for the 4 district city lords. Qi Kong stood out among the candidates, so she naturally had to go and watch the fun. For the cultivators in Spirit Immortal City, this day was extremely lively and anticipated. The entire city's citizens had gathered early to watch the competition, waiting for the final competition to begin. The final competition for the 4 district city lords was held in the middle of the 4 districts, on the Spirit Immortal City's spiritual immortal platform. The large spiritual immortal platform was circular in shape, with the platform as its center. It was 100 meters long and about 2 meters high from the ground, allowing everyone to see everything on the platform. The 4 sect envoys sent by the High Firmament Immortal sect were already sitting on the platform. Aside from them, there were 4 other district city lords sitting on the left and right sides. The final 4 winners could issue a challenge to the district city lord they wanted to challenge. Only by winning the challenge could they become the new district city lord. The first few days were a test of the candidate's leadership, courage, and adaptability. Those who were able to pass through the various tests and enter the final round were naturally not ordinary people. Among these people, some were members of large clans, some were leaders of powerful forces, some were leaders of mercenary groups, and some were even outstanding rogue cultivators. Of course, there were also people like Qi Kong whose origins were unknown. Under Du Fan's arrangement, Fengjiu and the others came to a tall pavilion and sat down. This tea house was one of their businesses, and this was the first time she had come here in several months. She sat in the 3-story pavilion while Qin Xian and the others prepared tea and pastries. She leaned against the railing and looked around. All she could see was a black mass of heads. "This place is not bad," Fengjiu smiled, then looked at Leng Hua and asked, "Who bought this place?" Leng Hua revealed a gentle smile and said, "Du Fan chose this place. He also bought it. Apart from this place, we have businesses in all 4 districts of the city. It seems that I've stayed in the small house in the center of the lake for too long." Fengjiu smiled and got up to lie down on the soft couch. Because it was high up, even lying on the soft couch, he could still see the table below. Du Fan walked in with pastries in his hands and said with a smile, "Master told us to develop our forces and take root here, so we naturally didn't dare to be negligent. In this spirit immortal city, we have tea houses, brothels, medicine houses, and so on. Once Qi Kong wins the position of city lord of the East City, we'll have people among the 4 city lords. It'll be more convenient for us to do things in the future." Fengjiu took a sip of the tea Qin Xian served and asked, "Then why did he choose the East City district? I thought that since we're living in the South City district, he would choose the city lord of the South City district." Chapter 37-27. Oh. Did he advance again? Fengjiu raised her eyebrows and said, "Even if he advanced again, he shouldn't be Qi Kang's opponent, right?" "That's true. However, the city lord of the South City district has an extraordinary temperament. Moreover, he has made a deal with us first and has kept his promise to not let anyone disturb us for the past few months. Therefore, after discussing with me, Qi Kong has decided to fight the East City district." Du Fan gently fanned himself with the fan in his hand. He lifted his robe and sat down at the table with a smile on his face. In his heart, he thought, Tang Jiwu really has the demeanor of a city lord. After making a deal with him, he didn't have any petty thoughts. On the contrary, he kept his promise and opened the door for us. Since that's the case, we naturally won't go against him. Moreover, Qi Kong was one of their people and city lord Tang didn't know about it. It would be more convenient for them to use their forces secretly when they needed to. Hearing Du Fan's words, Fengjiu smiled and looked down at the stage. She asked, "Which one of the people below is the city lord Tang you mentioned?" She wanted to see how extraordinary this person was to be praised by Du Fan. "The second one from the right, the one in black." Du Fan smiled and looked at the stage. He said, he originally had an old illness and his strength was stagnant. However, after taking that elixir, his old illness was cured and even his strength increased. If there's anyone among the 4 city lords who can keep their city lord position, it will definitely be city lord Tang. Fengjiu looked down and glanced at the people on the stage. Her eyes fell on the second middle-aged man in black on the right. She saw that the man was sitting upright with a strong waist and a strong back. His breathing was steady and his eyes were like torches. He looked in front of him with a dignified expression. The aura of a leader naturally flowed out. Looking at his demeanor, he is indeed not bad. He has the demeanor of a city lord. She nodded with a smile and looked at the other people. When she glanced at the man in white from the Lingxiao celestial sect, she raised her eyebrows. Another acquaintance. Leng Hua looked over and said, "It's that guy called Duan Yunhe. He has seen Qi Kong before. It doesn't matter. Even if he recognizes him, so what?" Fengjiu smiled and looked at the 16 people who finally stood out and were invited to the stage. Qi Kong was one of them. However, among the 16 people, Qi Kong Luk was the youngest. The 16 of them were all calm and composed, and their faces were filled with a dignified expression. With one look, one could tell that they were all people of high status. However, although these people looked calm and dignified, one could more or less see that they were a little nervous. Only Qi Kong, who was dressed in a navy blue robe, stood there calmly without the slightest hint of nervousness. After all, his strength was the strongest among these people and even among the 4 city lords. If he wanted to take down the city lord of the East District, it would be as easy as taking something out of his pocket. Chapter 37-28. He stared at the man in the dark blue robe in shock. That outstanding face. Wasn't he one of the people beside the red-clothed woman he had met in the small town? Why was he here? And why was he running for the position of city lord? Instinctively, he looked around. His intuition told him that if this man was here, then his master would also be nearby. Duan Yunhe's loss of composure naturally surprised the surrounding people. When the people from the celestial sect saw this, they looked at each other. One of the elders asked, "Yunhe, what's going on?" The city lord sitting at the side followed Duan Yunhe's gaze and looked at the young man. They seemed to be wondering what this young man had that could make the celestial sect's supremacy lose his composure. Duan Yunhe couldn't see the red-clothed woman's figure in the surroundings, so he glanced at Qi Kong before looking away and saying, "It's nothing." He flicked his robe that was splashed with tea and closed his eyes. He didn't want to say anything more. When the people beside him saw this, they didn't ask any more questions. A guard stepped forward to clean up the broken teacup. Then, the crowd looked at the 16 people standing on the stage again and re-examined them. On the stage, Qi Kong had one hand behind his back and the other in front of his abdomen. He stood there quietly and allowed the crowd to size him up as if he didn't see Duan Yunhe's loss of composure. His expression was normal. Although the crowd didn't say anything, they were more or less sizing up the young man. Everyone could see that Duan Yunhe's loss of composure was related to this man. It was as if he recognized him. Their gazes moved down and landed on the man's waist token. The 2 words, Qi Kong, were written on it. Qi Kong. They had never heard of him. However, to be able to stand out from so many candidates, one could imagine that this person wasn't ordinary. Cough. The elder from the High Firmament Celestial sect stood up and looked at the 16 people. He said, "I'm sure all of you know the rules of this competition. Among the 16 of you, only 4 can stand on the stage and challenge the city lords of the 4 districts. Next, it will be a one-on-one battle. Don't overdo it and don't kill. As for who your opponents will be, for the sake of fairness, we will draw lots to decide." As he spoke, he waved his hand and signaled for someone to bring a pot of lots forward. He said, "There are 16 lots here and 16 numbers. Number 1's opponent will be number 3, number 2 will be number 4, and so on and so forth. After this round, the semi-finals will be decided." Qi Kong looked at the lot in his hand. It had the number 16 written on it. He handed the lot to the person in charge of recording. Not long after, a board at the side hung the name tags of each person together, making it clear at a glance. Other than number 1 and no. 3 going up first, the others all retreated to the side. Along with the sound of the start of the battle, the people around the round platform suddenly tensed up, staring intently at the two people on the platform. Compared to the nervousness of the people below the stage and the calmness of the people on the stage, Duan Yunhe did not look at the intense battle between the two people on the stage. Instead, he shifted his gaze to Qi Kong. Chapter 37-29. With his strength, there was probably no one on the stage who was a match for him. He couldn't help but glance at the other city lords. Which one did he want to challenge? On the stage, the two figures fought fiercely. Fierce air currents whistled. Although there was no murderous intent in their moves, neither of them wanted to miss this once-in-5 years opportunity. Both of them displayed their special skills without any protection, trying their best to fight. The other people who were waiting to go on stage were all watching the two of them fight, because the winner was very likely to be their opponent. They naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity to observe their opponent. However, after a dozen or so moves, one of them was sent flying by the other's fists. He spat out a mouthful of blood and rolled off the stage. Fourth master. Fourth brother. The clansman of the middle-aged man who rolled off the stage exclaimed and quickly went forward to help him up. Fourth brother, how are you? Are you all right? The middle-aged man wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and shook his head at the clansman. Then, he looked at the middle-aged man on the stage and cupped his hands. The Qing family fist is indeed worthy of its reputation. I accept my loss wholeheartedly. Thank you for letting me win. On the stage, the middle-aged man cupped his hands in return. After glancing at the people below the stage, he walked to the side and sat down. Once the two of them had decided who was better, the second pair went up. After the two of them bowed to each other on the stage, their figures moved as fast as ghosts and attacked each other in an instant. The crowd watched and discussed. The winner is the head of the Qing family. The Qing family fist technique is famous far and wide. I heard that the head of the Qing family comprehended a set of Vajra fist technique some time ago. It's as strong as a mountain and has extremely strong inner strength. The head of the Qing family is a hot favorite this time. Even the bets have been set up. He's a popular candidate to enter the top 4. The others aren't weak either. Look at that one. That's the leader of the number 1 mercenary group, Genie Feng. And that one over there. Although he's a rogue cultivator, he's known as the Swift Sword Venerable, Shadowless Sword Venerable. And that one. All of them are top-notch figures. That's for sure. Our Spirit Immortal City is one of the top cities. If they weren't top-notch figures, how could they be the city lords of the 4 districts? Just as everyone was talking, another winner was decided on the stage. Another group of people went up to continue. In the loft, Fengjiu glanced at the people below the stage and narrowed her eyes, intending to take a break before watching again. In fact, she already knew who would emerge victorious in the end. Although these people were strong, in order to compete for the position of City Lord, in addition to strength, they also needed luck. Why did he say that? This was because if there was someone who could fight with the previous City Lord and even have a chance to win, but that person just had to face Qi Kong, then it would naturally be a waste of time. Lang Hua and the others watched from the top of the pavilion. The matches continued until it was Qi Kang's turn. His opponent was the mercenary commander. Even though Qi Kong was younger than him, the mercenary leader didn't underestimate him. After sizing him up, he cupped his hands and bowed. Please. Qi Kong returned the greeting. In the next moment, the two figures moved at the same time. Their fists and palms collided, and their spiritual power surged. Yunhe, do you know this person called Qi Kong? The elder at the side took a sip of tea and asked. Chapter 37-30. As soon as he finished speaking, he couldn't help but pause. He looked to the front and didn't say anything else. Because in just a short while, Qi Kong had kicked the mercenary group's leader off the stage. When the mercenary group's leader fell off the stage, He didn't seem to have realized what was going on. Leader. The mercenaries who were watching from below the stage quickly rushed forward, but they saw that their leader had already stood up. He patted the dust off his body and looked at Qi Kong on the stage. He cupped his hands and said, "Your Excellency, you have great skills. Thank you for letting me win." Qi Kong said. He looked away and walked to the center of the stage. He didn't care about the shocked gazes on and off the stage at all. It was as if he wasn't the one who had kicked the leader of the number 1 mercenary group off the stage in 3 moves. Because of this battle, almost everyone had a new understanding of Qi Kong. The 8 people who would advance to the next round had already been decided. Next would be the 8 people who would advance to the next round. At this moment, no one wanted to go up against Qi Kong. The leader of the number 1 mercenary group was so strong that even they wouldn't be able to kick him off the stage in 3 moves. However, Qi Kong had done it. Moreover, from the start of the battle until the end, the leader of the mercenary group hadn't even touched the corner of Qi Kang's clothes. With such strength and skills, they felt that whoever went up against him would have a hard time. As for the 4 city lords, the East City Lord's expression was normal, but his hand was tapping on the side of his chair from time to time. He looked at the people in front of him and analyzed quickly in his heart. The South City Lord sipped his tea. He wasn't worried at all about who would challenge him in the end because he had just made a breakthrough and was very confident in his current strength. Of course, he would never have thought that the young Qi Kang's strength would be above his. If he knew this, he probably wouldn't be drinking tea so calmly. As for the other 2 city lords, they also looked at the people in front of them. They were guessing who would have the ability to fight with them in the end. Sitting in this position, they had the ability to play some tricks. However, unless it was absolutely necessary, they didn't want to do so in front of the immortal sect disciples. After all, if they were discovered, it would be difficult for them to step down. 8-4. In the end, he drew another lot. When he saw the lot in his hand, Qi Kong glanced at the people around him and said, "I'm one." The head of the Qing clan moved his hand that was holding the stick. He looked at Qi Kong and said, "Your opponent is me." As he spoke, he stepped forward. The others retreated on their own accord. Seeing the 2 of them facing each other, they couldn't help but guess who would emerge victorious in this battle. The 2 of them didn't use any weapons. After a bow, the head of the Qing clan exerted strength in his fists and attacked Qi Kong like a fierce tiger. However, Qi Kong chose to avoid the attack. He stepped sideways and circled behind the head of the Qing clan. He raised his palm and chopped down. Looking at the 2 of them fighting, the East City Lord's heart skipped a beat. He took a sip of tea and put it down. He continued to watch the 2 of them fight. The head of the Qing clan's fists were like fierce tigers with hidden strength. Qi Kang's movements were strange and the wind from his palm was swift and fierce. The 2 of them exchanged less than 10 moves before the East City Lord saw the head of the Qing clan being sent flying. He staggered back and fell off the stage. "Good!" Someone in the audience shouted, and the whole scene suddenly boiled up. Chapter 37-31. His movement technique is very powerful, and his palm technique is also very powerful. Moreover, he has always had the upper hand in the battle. It seems like he hasn't fully displayed his strength yet. Where did this person come from? Even the Qing family head is not his match. In my opinion, there will definitely be a change in the city lord position this year. I wonder which city lord he will challenge. However, the strength of the city lords should not be underestimated. Compared to the city lords, Qi Kong is too young. He is young, but don't forget that he was able to stand out among thousands of people until the end. He must be very strong in all aspects. As long as he succeeds in challenging the city lord, he will be more than qualified to be the city lord of this district. Perhaps the words of the people below the stage disturbed the city lord East, or perhaps he was already prepared and had that thought that he shouldn't have. Therefore, when he saw the outcome of the battle, he quietly gave a look to one of the guards beside him. After Qi Kang's battle ended, he walked to the side and sat down. He only needed to wait for the others' battles to end before he could challenge the city lord who wanted to challenge him. At this moment, the guards helped them change into hot tea. The few people at the side watched the battle and took a sip of the tea. When Qi Kang picked up the tea, the aroma of the tea entered his nose. His expression changed slightly, and he looked up at the city lords. Seeing that those people were watching the competition, he gently scraped the teacup and took a sip of tea. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw that the East City Lord was looking at him while he was drinking tea. There was a trace of relief on his face. Leng Hua, who was in the attic, also saw the scene on the stage. A smile appeared on his gentle face as he watched quietly. When the battle between the few groups ended, the elder of the Lingxiao celestial sect stood up and looked at the few people. He said, "The 4 people who stand out in the end can challenge the city lords of the 4 districts. However, if they challenge the city lords, the casualties will be unpredictable. They will have to bear the consequences. We know." As soon as they finished speaking, one of them took a step forward and arrived in front of the city lord of the Western District. He said, "You would like to fight the city lord of the Western District." Hearing this, the city lord of the Western District stood up and walked to the center of the stage. Looking at the middle-aged man, the city lord of the Western District smiled. "Since the second master of the Yu family wants to learn from me, I will gladly oblige. Please." With that, a pair of sabers appeared in the hands of the Yu family's second master. Spiritual energy surged from his body as he suddenly charged at the West District city lord. The 2 sabers were sharp and contained a bloodthirsty killing intent. Unlike when he sparred with others before, this time, he was using killing intent. Below the stage, the crowd was discussing. "The Yu family is from the West City District. I heard that they have always been suppressed by the West City Lord. Last month, a young lady from the Yu family had an accident. I heard that it was done by the City Lord's son, but the matter was left unsettled in the end. No wonder the second master of the Yu family is so murderous. He probably wants to take this opportunity to kill the West City Lord. 5 years ago, the West City Lord used only one move to kill the person who challenged him. Today, the second master of the Yu family wants to challenge him. I'm afraid he won't be able to return alive. Challenging the City Lord is challenging the authority of the City Lord. They won't be merciful. You have to know that if you die on this stage, you die. There's no way to investigate." Bang! Chapter 37-32. Master. Second Master. Second Uncle. Several exclamations came out. The people of the Yu family squeezed forward and came to the front of the stage. When they saw the pale second master with blood flowing out of his mouth, their eyes turned red. "Second brother, come down." An older middle-aged man looked at his second brother on the stage and clenched his fists tightly under his sleeves. Their strength was still far from being comparable to the West City Lord. If they continued to fight, they were afraid that, the second master of the Yu family wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and gritted his teeth as he stood up again. He held 2 sabers in his hands and injected spiritual power into them. He rushed forward and the sharp saber energy attacked the calm and composed West City Lord at a speed that was too fast to be heard. Swoosh swoosh. The West City Lord narrowed his eyes and quickly dodged to the side. Who knew that the moment he dodged, the other side of the blade suddenly slashed across. He only felt a whooshing sound as the blade slashed across his shoulder. The pain of the blade piercing into his flesh instantly came. Hiss. He took a deep breath and quickly retreated. The wound on his shoulder was so deep that his bones could be seen. Blood gushed out, and the warm blood quickly soaked his robes. The thick smell of blood also rushed into his nose. Glancing at the wound on his shoulder, a murderous look flashed across the West City Lord's eyes. He turned his palm under his sleeve and a small saber flew out in the next moment and shot toward the second master of the Yu family. Swoosh! Second brother, be careful. Seeing this scene, the middle-aged man below the stage exclaimed and his face changed greatly. However, they could not do anything and did not have the strength to fight with the West City Lord on the stage. Rushing forward, Second Master Yu only felt a sharp killing intent coming at him. There seemed to be a cold light shooting at him from the front, but he couldn't even see what it was. His body instinctively dodged, but who would have thought that the attack would be so fast that he wouldn't be able to dodge at all? Swoosh! Ah! The saber pierced the second master of the Yu family's heart and flew out of his body with a sharp swoosh, leaving a bloody hole in his chest. The second master of the Yu family could not withstand the force and was sent flying off the stage with a bang. Master! The woman below the stage cried out in alarm. Her face turned pale as blood rushed to her head and she fainted. Mother! Mother! Father! Second master! Second brother! The audience below the stage was in chaos, and there were chaotic cries of alarm mixed with deep worry and anxiety. The people of the Yu family rushed forward to help the second master of the Yu family, who had fallen to the ground with blood flowing out of his mouth. Second brother. Looking at the wound on his chest, the patriarch of the Yu family's voice trembled. He only had one brother, and now he was in such a state. Father. Second uncle. The crowd squeezed forward. A young man in his 20s supported his unconscious mother and looked at his dying father. His eyes reddened as he stared at the West City Lord on the stage. He pushed his mother to his cousin beside him and wanted to rush up the stage, but he was held back by the people beside him. Do you want to die? Now that your father is like this, do you still want him to worry? An old man shouted in a deep voice, his hand pressing down on the man's shoulder. Chapter 37-33. Uncle, my father, how is my father? The man asked in a trembling voice. Looking at his dying father, his body was trembling. His father was in the prime of his life. Was there really no hope for him? His wound is on his chest. You should carry him back and prepare for his funeral. The West City Lord stood on the stage with his hands behind his back as he looked down at the Yu family. When he glanced at the dying second master, a look of disdain flashed across his eyes. Did he think he could fight with him? What a fool's dream. Dongji. Second master Yu, who was being supported by the Yu family head, was bleeding from his mouth. He looked at his only son and said in a weak voice, take care of your mother and the rest. Work hard on your cultivation. Don't seek revenge, cough, cough, cough. When Yu Dongji heard this, he saw his father cough violently. Blood kept flowing out of his mouth and out of his chest. He couldn't help but cry. Father! If you want to live, quickly send him to the South City Medicine Tower. A soft and languid voice rang out. Duan Yunhe, who was on the stage, was shocked when he heard this voice. He quickly looked around, but he couldn't find the source of the voice. When Qi Kong heard his master's voice, he got up and walked off the stage. He took out an elixir and popped it into second master Yu's mouth. At the same time, he took out a bottle of medicine to stop the bleeding and sprinkled it on the bleeding wound. Then, he looked at the stunned Yu family members. What are you still standing there for? Do you want to watch him die? Qi Kang's voice was deep and powerful, jolting them back to their senses. Seeing that the wound had stopped bleeding in an instant, the Yu family's patriarch was shocked. He hurriedly helped his second brother up and carried him on his back. He said to Qi Kong, many thanks, young Master Qi. As soon as he finished speaking, he quickly led the others to the medicinal pavilion. The South City Medicine Tower was a medicine tower that had risen to prominence in recent months. People knew about it because of the sky-high prices of its medicines. However, they didn't know that this medicine tower, which only sold medicine, actually had medical skills. As they watched the group of people leave in a hurry, the surrounding people couldn't help but look around. Who was talking just now? Where did that voice come from? Why didn't I see anyone? It sounds like a woman's voice. I don't know where it's coming from. That voice said that he wanted to be sent to the medicine tower in South City alive. Could it be that he didn't see that second Master Yu's blade had pierced right through his chest? Moreover, almost no one can afford the things in the medicine tower, but I've never heard of anyone who knows medicine in the medicine tower. I don't know what kind of medicinal pill Qi Kong gave second Master Yu just now, but when he used his hemostatic medicine, the bleeding stopped immediately. I've never heard of such a powerful hemostatic medicine before. In an instant, everyone's attention was diverted. All of them landed on the calm man in a navy blue robe. The other party slowly walked down. At this moment, under everyone's gazes, he walked back to his seat with steady footsteps and sat down. He did not mind the crowd sizing him up. The West City governor furrowed his brows and scanned his surroundings. He couldn't find the source of the voice. However, he had confidence in himself. With that strike, it was impossible for the second son of the Yu family to survive. No one could save him. Chapter 37-34. Indeed, he had not misjudged him, and the sect master had not misjudged him. The people from the high firmament celestial sect looked at each other in surprise. They looked around but could not find the source of the voice. However, what made them even more surprised was that the medicine in Qi Kang's hand had such a miraculous effect. The bleeding wound actually stopped after he sprinkled some medicine on it. Qi Kang, who made the medicine in your hand? The elder from the high firmament celestial sect asked. He was very curious about the medicine. Hearing the elder's question, the city lords and the others on the stage all looked at Qi Kang. Not only was this person's background mysterious, but the medicine in his hand was also very mysterious. The Spirit Immortal City was a big city, so it naturally had everything it wanted. Even rare and precious medicinal pills could be bought here as long as one could afford it. However, a medicine that could stop the bleeding just by sprinkling some medicine was unheard of. Qi Kang looked at them and saw the curiosity and inquiry in their eyes. He said in a low voice, "It was made by the ghost doctor." Ghost doctor? Everyone looked at each other. They had never heard of such an unfamiliar word. They had never heard of a ghost doctor. Then where is the ghost doctor now? Elder Ling Xiao asked again. No comment. Qi Kang looked away and did not look at them again. Is the ghost doctor a man or a woman? Where did she learn from? No comment. Hearing his words, the city lords on the stage looked at him. This Qi Kang did not even give face to the elder of the high firmament celestial sect. He was really arrogant. After being rebuffed, the elder felt as if he was suffocating in his heart. He felt very uncomfortable. The two supremacies next to him glanced at Qi Kang and frowned. They looked displeased. Obviously, they did not like his attitude. However, Duan Yunhe looked away and drank his tea. He did not say a word. The challenge on the stage continued. In the attic, Feng Jiu leaned leisurely on the soft couch, watching the scene below with a smile. Du Fan, who was at the side, ate a piece of pastry and asked, "Master, why do you want to save the second master of the Yu family?" If his master didn't speak up, then it would be difficult for the second master of the Yu family to make it to the medicinal pavilion. If I want to save him, then I'll save him. It's just a matter of saying a word, Feng Jiu said casually, then smiled, just as well, Fan Lin can practice his skills. When Leng Hua heard this, a trace of a smile appeared between his brows. Having been by his master's side for so long, he more or less understood his master's temperament. They had a panoramic view of everything below, so it wasn't strange that their master wanted to save the second master of the Yu family. The challenge on the stage continued. The other two challenged the South City Lord and the North City Lord respectively. Their fates were better than the second master of the Yu family. They were defeated with only some injuries, which were not fatal. When it was Qi Kang's turn, the gazes of the city lords all landed on him. Currently, among the 4 city lords, only the East City Lord had not been challenged. This was because everyone knew that the East City Lord, who was in charge of the East City District, was the strongest of the 4. No one was willing to touch this hard nail. At this time, the city lords of the other 3 districts were all wondering which of the 3 of them would Qi Kang challenge. Chapter 37-35. Everyone was slightly surprised. They did not expect Qi Kang to challenge the East City Governor. For a moment, everyone's expression became subtle. Only Duan Yunhe glanced at the East City Governor and then looked at Qi Kang. No one knew what he was thinking. The East City Governor's eyes flashed. He glanced at Qi Kang and an inexplicable smile appeared on his face. "Ha ha ha, you have guts." He stood up, laughed out loud, and stepped in front of Qi Kang. Qi Kang looked at him and said ambiguously, "East City Governor, you have guts too." Hearing this, the East City Governor's heart skipped a beat. He glanced at Qi Kang and sneered. "Qi Kang, is it? Then, let me see what you're made of." Before he could finish his sentence, the East City Governor was sent flying by a punch and fell heavily on the stage. Pfft! The East City Governor spat out a mouthful of blood. His whole face was red. No one knew if it was because of the pain from the punch or because he was angry. Qi Kang rubbed his fist and walked closer step by step. His deep voice was calm as usual. "I'm sorry. You talk too much. I couldn't help but test my strength on you. After all, the East City Governor added tea for me. You have to take this punch to know how strong it is." Hearing this, the faces of the people on and off the stage changed. They all whispered. "What does he mean? The East City Governor added tea for him? Is there a problem with the tea? How is that possible? The East City Governor is the strongest among the 4 city governors. Does he need it? That's hard to say. After all, Qi Kang's strength has been outstanding since the beginning. It's understandable that the East City Governor is afraid. Like I said, everything has a shameful side. For an election like this, if it's not because there's someone above covering for it, then it's because the people below used dirty tricks. How filthy." The faces of the people from the high firmament celestial sect turned unsightly. The 3 city lords looked at the East City Lord in astonishment. They didn't expect the East City Lord to resort to such underhanded means. Being stared at and discussed by the crowd, the East City Lord's face turned from red to white. He glared at Qi Kang and said, "Don't slander me. What nonsense. You should know that I can skin you alive for slandering the City Lord." Qi Kang walked over with his hands behind his back and said, "You know very well whether I'm slandering you or not. However, I'm sorry to say that your medicine has no effect on me." Qi Kang looked at the East City Governor and said, "East City Governor, get up and continue the fight." The East City Governor's face turned pale. He clenched his teeth and stood up with one hand on his chest. Did he really want to lie on the stage forever? That punch was so powerful that it hurt from his chest to his back. It took him a while to catch his breath. He was already afraid of Duan Yunhe. Now that he fought with Duan Yunhe, he felt even more terrified. Duan Yunhe walked to the seat where Qi Kang was sitting. He picked up the half-drunk tea and sniffed it. Then, he brought the tea to the elder and the 2 venerables. "We can't smell it." The 2 venerables shook their heads. They didn't smell anything wrong. Chapter 37-36. It's true that there's a medicine in it that disperses cultivation. However, this medicine is colorless and tasteless. How did you know? The elder looked at Chi Kong and asked. He was very surprised. If he hadn't tasted it, he wouldn't have been able to smell the medicine in it. Not only did he know, but he also drank it, and nothing happened to him. What was the reason for this? When Chi Kong heard this, he glanced at the elder and said, "It seems that what you should be asking now is not how I know. You should be asking about the matter of the East City Lord drugging me, right?" Hearing this, the elder looked at the East City Lord and didn't speak for a while. The East City Lord's eyes flashed slightly. He stood up, clutching his chest. "I don't know what you're talking about. How can you say that I drugged you? This is ridiculous." Chi Kong glanced at him and said in a low voice that contained the pressure and confidence of an expert, "You know very well whether you did or not. I don't need you to admit it, because it doesn't matter whether you admit it or not. You've already reached the end of the East City Lord's seat today." As soon as he finished speaking, he instantly attacked. His fist contained a powerful airflow and struck out fiercely. It was so fast that no one could see his fist at all. They could only hear the heavy sound of the fist hitting the body, followed by the sound of bones being broken. Hiss! The East City Lord, who had just stood up, screamed. His whole body was lifted up by the punch. His feet left the ground and he knelt down with a plop. His whole body was lying forward because of the intense pain. He was in so much pain that he couldn't stand up. This punch caused the people from the High Firmament Immortal sect to suddenly stand up in shock. They had been staring at Chi Kong the entire time, but they didn't even see his movements clearly. From this, it could be seen just how fast he was. When the other three city lords saw this scene, their hearts couldn't help but jump. They secretly breathed a sigh of relief and thought to themselves, if Chi Kong had challenged them, I'm afraid they would have ended up like the East City Lord. Do you admit defeat? Chi Kong stood there and looked down at the East City Lord, who was kneeling in front of him. With his strength, it was easy for him to deal with the East City Lord. Moreover, he didn't show his full strength. Blood trickled from the corner of the East City Lord's mouth. He raised his head and looked at Chi Kong in front of him. There was a sinister look in his eyes. He gritted his teeth and said word by word, "I admit defeat." Impossible. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly leaped up. A cold light flashed in his hand as he attacked Chi Kong. Chi Kong frowned as the murderous aura rushed towards him. With a twist of his palm, a palm wind instantly shot out. That palm whistled through the air like a ferocious tiger with a force of 1,000 jin. P. With a loud bang, the East City Lord's shrill scream reached the sky. A mouthful of blood spurted out from his mouth and spilled on the ground like a red plum blossom. It was a ghastly sight. He flew out like a kite with a broken string. No one could save him. No one could save him in time. He fell off the stage under everyone's shocked gaze and landed among the onlookers. Hiss! Seeing this scene, the audience below the stage could not help but gasp. They looked at the East City Lord, who was on the verge of death after falling to the ground and could not even stand up. They only felt a wave of shock in their hearts, and their hearts palpitated with fear. Chapter 37:37. It was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. After a long while, Duan Yunhe coughed lightly and stood up. He looked at the crowd and said, "The City Lord election is held once every 5 years. From this moment on, the City Lord of the East District will be Chi Kong. The City Lords of the other 3 districts will remain unchanged." The voice that contained the aura of spirit force clearly entered everyone's ears, causing them to return to their senses. Some people below the stage looked at Chi Kong with a complicated expression, some people had anticipation and joy in their eyes, and some people looked like they were waiting to watch a good show. Although the City Lord election was held once every 5 years, the connections that the incumbent City Lord had accumulated over the past 5 years were not something that could be easily overthrown. Moreover, where did Chi Kong come from? If he did not have a strong subordinate, it would be difficult for him to hold the position of City Lord of the East District. At this time, the other people from the High Firmament Celestial sect also regained their senses. They looked at Qi Kong with mixed feelings in their eyes. After a while, the elder stroked his beard and walked forward. He said, "Qi Kong, I'll send someone to accompany you to the East District Governor's mansion to hand over the position." He paused and looked at the City Lord of the East District, who was on the verge of death. He sighed and ordered in a deep voice, "Carry him back first. Tell his family to move out of the East District Governor's mansion by today." "Yes." The city guard respectfully responded and quickly carried the City Lord of the East District away. At this time, the people in the East District Governor's mansion who heard the news exclaimed in disbelief, "This is impossible. How is this possible? We've lived here for 10 years, and our master has always been the City Lord. How could?" The messenger panted and said, "It's true. The election is over. The people from the High Firmament Celestial sect will accompany the new City Lord to hand over the position." Hearing this, the people in the mansion felt their legs go weak and fell to the ground in disbelief. If the City Lord was replaced, they would not be able to keep the wealth that they had accumulated over the years because of the City Lord. Following the end of the competition, the crowd gradually dispersed. It had been many years since there had been a change of City Lord. Now that the City Lord had been replaced with Qi Kong, it was likely that the East District would undergo a major change in the near future. Thinking of this, some people were already thinking of finding time to visit the new East City Lord with gifts in the East City Lord's mansion. In the tea house, Fengjiu and the others were not in a hurry to leave after watching the election. She lay on the soft couch and narrowed her eyes. She said to the people around her, "I'm going to sleep for a while. I'll go back later." Hearing this, the others quietly retreated. Leng Xuan brought a blanket to cover her and then stood guard by her side. As for the medicine building, the people of the Yu family were all standing guard in the backyard of the medicine building. When they heard the voice's reminder to send the people to the medicine building, they thought that they would be driven out. However, after an elegant man walked out and asked about the situation, they sent the people in. He had been in there for quite some time now. How was the situation? This caused the people guarding outside to be extremely worried. "Uncle, my father will be fine, right?" The man's face was filled with unconcealable worry. He looked at the tightly shut door without any movement. His heart was in turmoil and he was restless. Chapter 37-38. Outside the medicine building, many people craned their necks to watch. Now that the election was over, many curious people gathered around the medicine building. They all wanted to know if the second master of the Yu family could be saved. In the backyard of the medicine building, Fan Lin pushed open the door and walked out. The people of the Yu family, who were waiting in the courtyard, quickly surrounded him when they saw him come out. "Young master, how is my second brother?" Patriarch Yu quickly stepped forward and asked. The others behind him all looked at Fan Lin nervously. Fan Lin glanced at them and revealed a refined smile, "Don't worry, his life is saved. However, he still needs to be carefully nursed back to health. He won't be able to get out of bed for at least half a month." Hearing this, the crowd couldn't help but cry tears of joy. They were ecstatic and felt that it was unbelievable. With such a serious injury, the young man in front of them was actually able to save him. One could imagine how brilliant his medical skills were. "Thank you, young master, thank you." Patriarch Yu quickly cupped his hands and thanked him. Finally, a smile appeared on his face, and he said, "When we go back, we will definitely prepare a generous gift to thank you." Fan Lin smiled and told them what to pay attention to. He said, "He is now out of danger and is not suitable to be moved. Go in and see him. Leave 1 or 2 people to take care of him. Come back tomorrow evening to pick him up." "Yes, yes, yes, we will listen to young master." Everyone quickly responded. Patriarch Yu asked again, may I know young master's name? When they came to seek medical treatment, they only gave their own names and forgot to ask for the name of the person in front of them. My name is Fan Lin. He opened his mouth and told them to go in and see the person inside. Then, he walked forward, picked some medicinal herbs, and had them boil them into medicine. Today was the election for the city lord. He knew that Qi Kong intended to win the city lord of the East. His master and the others had all gone to watch the fun. He had originally planned to go too, but he had not finished concocting the medicine on hand, so he stayed in the medicine building. He did not expect that his master would send him such an injured person. Thinking of the serious and fatal injury of the person inside, he shook his head and smiled. If he hadn't been by his master's side all this time, and if he hadn't learned a few things in Dan Wang's valley, he probably wouldn't have been able to heal that kind of wound. However, that person was lucky. With a word from his master, Qi Kong gave him medicine and stopped his bleeding. Otherwise, even if he was sent over, he wouldn't be able to save his life. Young master, there are a lot of people gathered outside and they've been peeking their heads out. Some of them even came in to ask if the second master of the Yu family is dead. One of the medicine attendants stepped forward when he saw Fan Lin come out. Hearing this, Fan Lin smiled and said, don't bother about them. Do what you need to do. Just do your part well. Yes. The medicine attendant replied before retreating. Although the people in the medicinal pavilion did not spread any news, it did not take long for the news to spread. The second master of the Yu family, who everyone thought was dead for sure, was saved and not dead. The people of the Yu family happily returned to the residence to report the news. The people in the city were also very surprised when they heard the news. What? The second master of the Yu family was saved? Who was it that saved him? How can he be saved with such injuries? Chapter 37-39. When the news that the second master of the Yu family had been rescued reached the West City Lord's ears, his face immediately darkened. In the hall of the city lord's residence, he slammed the teacup in his hand on the table and shouted, Men! City Lord! The city guard quickly stepped forward. What is the background of the South City's medicine tower? Go and investigate. Yes. The city guard quickly retreated. In the East City District City Lord's mansion, the people from the High Firmament Immortal sect accompanied Qi Kong to the City Lord's mansion. After entering the City Lord's mansion, two other people accompanied Qi Kong to the City Lord's mansion while the elder took Duan Yunhe to a secluded place. Yunhe, do you know who this Qi Kong is? The elder looked at Duan Yunhe and asked. Seeing that Duan Yunhe's eyes flashed and he remained silent, the elder snorted and said, Don't use the same excuse as before to tell me that you don't know. If you didn't know, would you have us accompany him to the City Lord's mansion? If you didn't know, would you be so protective of him? Hearing this, Duan Yunhe sighed and said, Head elder, I'm only doing this for the good of the immortal sect. You've also seen that Qi Kong is not an ordinary person. Since we can help him, why should we put on airs? Then why don't you tell me who he is that you're so afraid of him? The first elder asked again. Don't tell me you're not going to say anything after returning to the sect. Or are you not going to tell anyone? The head elder's face darkened and he looked at Duan Yunhe with displeasure. Hearing this, Duan Yunhe pondered for a moment before saying, He's one of the subordinates of that woman in red. What? The head elder didn't know who Duan Yunhe was referring to. After all, it had been a few months and he had long forgotten about that matter. He killed Peak Master Ren and crippled a dozen immortal sect disciples. As Duan Yunhe spoke, he looked at the astonished first elder and continued, that Qi Kong is one of the red-clothed woman's subordinates. As I said before, the dozen or so subordinates of the red-clothed woman are all outstanding men and women. They aren't ordinary guards. The great elder's face was filled with astonishment. The shock in his heart was no less than when he heard that Peak Master Ren had been killed. He had seen Qi Kong today as well, and his actions carried the aura of a superior. Moreover, his strength was restrained, and his cultivation was unfathomable. Even the disciples of aristocratic families would find it difficult to compare to a person with such a bearing. However, such a person was actually only one of the subordinates of the red-clothed woman. When he thought of this, his emotions instantly became chaotic. One of his subordinates. If one of them was already so powerful, then what about the others? He already knew that the red-clothed woman who had killed Peak Master Ren and the others were very powerful, but he didn't expect that when he saw it with his own eyes, this kind of shock went straight to the depths of his heart, causing him to be unable to calm down. Did you recognize him today? The great elder calmed himself down and looked at Duan Yunhe with a complicated expression. Yes. Duan Yunhe replied and said, moreover, that red-clothed woman was also watching the city lord election today. The mysterious female voice that spoke was that red-clothed woman's voice. Therefore, I'm thinking that the medicine tower that she spoke of is also one of her people. Chapter 3740. Duan Yunhe's expression changed slightly as he said, there should be some of her people in the medicine tower. We have to report this matter to the sect master. The head elder calmed down for a while before he paused and continued, also, keep an eye on Qi Kong. He came here alone, so you should stay and help him with the handover. Since he's the woman in red's people, try to befriend him as much as possible. I won't stay any longer and need to return to the sect. Hearing this, Duan Yunhe nodded and said, I understand. On the other side, the head elder left first, leaving behind 3 people to help with the handover. On the other side, Fengjiu slept in the teahouse's attic until evening. When she was about to go back, she heard from Ling Shuang that Fan Lin had arrived and was waiting outside. Let him in. Fengjiu said. She stood up, stretched her waist, and moved a little. Ling Shuang walked outside and called out. Not long after, he walked in with Fan Lin. Master. Fan Lin called out with a refined smile on his face, that second master of the Yu family has been rescued. He's still lying in the medicine pavilion and can't be moved, so I told them to bring him back tomorrow evening. He also took advantage of this time to come over and inform his master. His injuries were fatal. Since you were able to save him, it shows that your medical skills have improved a lot. Fengjiu smiled and looked at Fan Lin, who had just walked in, and said, you saved this person from the Yu family today, so you'll probably be busy from now on. I'll take advantage of this opportunity. Fan Lin said. He knew that the medicine tower's reputation would also spread after today's incident. At that time, there would definitely be many people coming to visit. You can stay in the medicine tower tonight. I'll ask Hui Lang to accompany you tonight. Fengjiu couldn't help but smile as she said this. She brushed her clothes and walked out, I'll go back first. If there's anything else, we'll talk about it at the residence. Ask Hui Lang to accompany him at the medicine tower tonight. Hearing this, Fan Lin couldn't help but be stunned. What did this mean? However, before he could ask, he saw that his master had already walked out, so he hurriedly followed. Master, you want me and Grey Medicine to stay at the medicinal building tonight? He thought of something and couldn't help but ask, is it because the second master of the Yu family is there? Fengjiu went downstairs and walked to the back door as he replied, well, since he's been saved, we shouldn't let him die so easily. At least, we can use him to make your name known. You guys stay there tonight. Seeing his master enter the carriage from the back door, Fan Lin hurriedly pulled Leng Hua aside and asked, Master, what do you mean by this? Is someone trying to harm second master Yu? Leng Hua smiled and said warmly, he was injured by the West City Master. Now that you've rescued him, I don't think the West City Master will let this go. You guys stay here tonight. Maybe there will be some movement. Hearing this, Fan Lin suddenly understood. He watched his master and the others leave. When he saw Hui Lang standing to the side, he smiled at him and said, then I'll have to trouble you tonight. Hui Lang rubbed his wrist and said, just treat it as practice. Du Fan walked out from the back, gently fanning himself with the fan in his hand, and said, they're taking care of Master in the residence, and you two are at the medicine tower. Then I'll go to the East City Master's residence and see if Qi Kong needs any help. Chapter 37-41. Upon hearing this, Du Fan's eyes flashed as he said, since we have nothing to do, let's take a walk. Thus, after Du Fan left the tea house, he walked to the main street and bought some sauced meat to go with his wine. Then, he carried it to the East City Governor's mansion. As for Fan Lin and Hui Lang, one was in the open while the other was in the dark. After half a day, Qi Kong was almost done with the handover at the East City Governor's mansion. With the help of the people from the Soaring Firmament Celestial sect, the handover was even easier. When Du Fan arrived at the East City Governor's mansion with the sauced meat, the sky had already darkened. When he arrived at the governor's mansion, he saw Qi Kong escorting the other two supremacies from the Soaring Firmament Celestial sect out. He stood at the side and did not walk up to them. Duan Yunhe had been looking for an opportunity to chat with Qi Kong, so he stayed behind. Thus, when they saw the two supremacies off, they saw Du Fan standing not too far away. Why are you here? Qi Kong asked when he saw Du Fan coming over. Du Fan waved the braised meat in his hand and walked up to Duan Yunhe with a smile. I bought some braised meat from the Eastern Street and came over to celebrate you becoming the city lord. He swept his gaze around and smiled at Duan Yunhe. We meet again. Duan Yunhe nodded slightly. I didn't expect to meet you here. After killing the peak master of the Celestial sect and annihilating a few clans, no one would expect them to come to the Spirit Celestial City near the Soaring Firmament Celestial sect. Since we've met, why don't we have a drink? The East Courtyard has been vacated. Let's go there. Qi Kong said and walked in with them. As for the West City Governor, his face darkened when he heard the news from the city guard. He sat on the main seat and looked at the city guard kneeling before him. Suddenly, he picked up the teacup on the table and threw it at the city guard. Clang! Bastard! After investigating for half a day, you tell me you can't find out where they came from? Is there anyone in the city who can't be found? What a bastard! Get out! He cursed angrily and smashed the teacup on the city guard's head, causing blood to seep out. The city guard could only lower his head, his body trembling. He didn't dare to utter a single word. Only when he heard the city guard tell him to scram did he hurriedly retreat. Unable to suppress the anger in his chest, he walked outside with his hands behind his back. Looking at the sky outside, his eyes were cold and bloodthirsty. If he wanted to kill someone, even if the King of Hell didn't accept him, he would still kick him into the King of Hell's palace. The night grew darker and quieter. In the medicine pavilion, Fan Lin was concocting medicine, while in the rear courtyard, the second master of the Yu family was being guarded and taken care of by several members of the Yu family. As for Hui Lang, he was hidden in the shadows, keeping an eye on the surroundings. Although it was already late at night, the people of the Yu family were still busy. They were busy feeding and changing the medicine, and they also had to pay attention to what Fan Lin said to see if the body had a fever or if the wound had become inflamed in the latter half of the night. Because of this, they didn't know that several figures had sneaked into the medicine pavilion under the cover of the night and were heading towards the rear courtyard. However, before they could reach the rear courtyard, the four cultivators who had sneaked in were silently dealt with by Hui Lang. When Hui Lang dragged the four corpses to the front and threw them to the side, the medicine attendants in the medicine pavilion were dumbfounded. Their faces turned pale and their eyes widened as they looked at the corpses. What are you waiting for? Drag them away and deal with them. Hui Lang glanced at the two attendants and coldly ordered them. How do we deal with this? Chapter 37-42. Grey Wolf glanced at them and said, Go find Fan Lin and get some medicine to destroy the corpse. After saying this, He no longer paid attention to them and went to the back of the courtyard to continue to squat on the tree. When the two medicine attendants heard this, they quickly dragged them away and went to find Fan Lin. As for the West City Lord, he was waiting in his mansion for the people he sent out to report back. Who would have thought that after midnight, the 4 people he sent out did not return? This made him frown slightly, and his heart was burning with anger. What kind of guards could there be in a small medicine building? The people from the Yu family were even less of a threat. Although the strength of the people he sent out was not the best, it was more than enough to deal with the people from the small medicine building and the Yu family. However, they had not returned yet. Could it be that something had happened? Thinking of this, he walked up and down in the hall with his hands behind his back. Finally, he decided to go and see for himself. If something really happened, he would come out and directly kill all the people in the medicine building. To vent the anger in his heart, he changed into his night clothes and covered his face. Then, he went to the medicine building alone. At midnight, it was time to sleep. The street outside was quiet, and only the lights in front of some houses and shops were still on. He found the medicine building and saw that it was still brightly lit. He narrowed his eyes and planned to sneak in from the back. Therefore, he deliberately went around to the back and came to the wall. With a light tap of his toes, he leaped onto the top of the wall and squatted down to size up the situation inside. However, at this moment, he was hit hard on the back of his neck. He was shocked and felt his vision go black. He fainted and fell down the wall. Bang! Bang! 2 loud sounds were heard. The first sound was like a muffled sound of a stick hitting the body, and the second sound was the sound of a body falling to the ground. Who is it? The sound startled the Yu family members who were guarding the courtyard. They looked back and were dumbfounded. They saw a black figure falling down the wall and fainting on the ground. On the wall, another black figure was holding a thick wooden stick and patting it. Obviously, the person who fell was knocked down by the black figure on the wall. He's a member of my medicine tower. Fan Lin walked out of nowhere, wearing a sky blue robe. It was obvious that he had already changed. Hui Lang glanced at Fan Lin before jumping down from above. He lifted the black veil covering the man's face and couldn't help but sneer, "Isn't this the West City Lord?" Fan Lin raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at the person on the ground. He was a little surprised. The West City Lord was the City Lord of the West City District. How could he come here personally and be defeated by Hui Lang so easily? It seemed that he had underestimated them. Otherwise, with his strength, even if he wasn't a match for them, he would at least be able to exchange a few blows with them. When the Yu family's people heard that it was the West City Lord, they couldn't help but be startled. After looking at each other, they quickly stepped forward to take a look. Sure enough, the person lying on the ground was the West City Lord. One of the Yu family's people showed hatred in his eyes as he gritted his teeth and said, "I'll kill him." As soon as his voice fell, he took out a dagger from his sleeve and was about to stab the fainted West City Lord on the ground, but he was pulled back by the people around him. Chapter 37-43. The middle-aged man from the Yu family pulled the person beside him aside and asked Fan Lin, "Master Fan, why is the West City Lord here?" Fan Lin stood there, looking like an elegant noble young master. With a smile on his face, he said, "When the West City Lord heard that your second master was still alive, he wanted to kill him. Earlier tonight, he had already sent a few cultivators over, but we quietly took care of them. I guess it's because those people didn't return to report, so he came over personally." Although he spoke so casually, the members of the Yu family felt their hearts jump out of their chests. It turned out that the West City Lord had not given up and wanted to kill their second master. And he had already sent a few people here. If they hadn't told them, they wouldn't have known at all. Thinking of this, they couldn't help but feel a little scared. At the same time, they were secretly shocked. The people of this medicine tower were unfathomable. They were able to quietly get rid of the people sent by the West City Lord. Even the West City Lord, who was vicious and ruthless, was hit by a stick and fell here. One could imagine their strength. Looking at the unconscious West City Lord on the ground, the Yu family members' eyes flashed. If it weren't for the fact that this was the medicine tower, if they killed the West City Lord, it would cause trouble for the medicine tower. They really wanted to kill the West City Lord with their own hands. After thinking for a while, the middle-aged man from the Yu family asked, "Master Fan, how do you plan to deal with the West City Lord?" "Kill him directly." Hui Lang looked at Fan Lin and asked. If they could kill the West City Lord, he would give him another hit with the stick and make sure he stopped breathing. Fan Lin shook his head. "You can't kill him. He is the West City Lord, and the power behind him is not small. If he dies here, I'm afraid that trouble will follow." It wasn't that they were afraid of the West City Lord's revenge, but if a City Lord died, the people of the Lingxiao Immortal Sect would definitely investigate. At that time, they were afraid of causing trouble for their master, especially when their master was about to give birth in a few months. They couldn't cause any trouble here. "Don't kill him. When he wakes up, he will still deal with the medicine tower." As Grey Wolf spoke, he waved the wooden stick in his hand. He suddenly felt that this wooden stick was quite handy to use. Fan Lin smiled. "No, he won't dare to deal with us openly." When he heard this, Grey Wolf thought for a moment and said, "All right. Since I'm not going to kill him, I'll teach him a lesson. I'll teach him a lesson that he'll never forget." He chuckled and reached out to seal the acupoints on the unconscious West City Lord's body. Then, he dragged him with one hand and walked towards the front building. The two attendants in the building had personally dealt with the corpses. At this moment, they were still thinking about the sizzling sound that came from the corpses when the medicinal liquid was sprinkled on them. Then, the large corpses turned into a pool of blood in front of them. Thinking about this scene, their hearts couldn't help but shiver. They had been working here for a few months, and only today did they know that their cultured and refined young master could actually concoct such a frightening and terrifying liquid to destroy corpses and evidence. Although they were also cultivators, their cultivation wasn't high and they weren't very old. This was the first time they had encountered such a situation. At this moment, their hearts were still beating wildly. Chapter 37-44. The body of the person being dragged was rubbing against the ground, not moving at all. If they hadn't seen his chest rise and fall as they approached, they would have thought that it was another corpse. However, when they looked up and saw the face of the West City Lord, they were so frightened that their eyes widened and their mouths fell open. This, isn't this the West City Lord? Go about your business." Hui Lang glanced at the two of them and directly dragged the West City Lord to a corner. There, he took everything from him and took off his clothes, leaving only his underpants. When the two medicine attendants saw this scene, they were so frightened that their little hearts thumped. This was the West City Lord. If he was dead, it would be one thing, but he was not dead. What if he woke up? Just as they were thinking, they heard the black-clothed man in the corner shout at them. "You two, go to Fan Lin and get some ink that can't be washed off." The two of them looked at each other. There was such a thing. Puzzled, they walked to the backyard. Not long after, they really came back with ink and a pen and handed it to Hui Lang. The next morning, the entire Spirit Immortal City was in an uproar. This was because a piece of news had spread throughout the entire Spirit Immortal City early in the morning. Almost everyone knew that the West City Lord had been hung upside down on the competition stage. He had been stripped down to his underpants and had a turtle drawn on his face. Once the news spread, the people in the 4 districts of the Spirit Immortal City were shocked. That was the West City Lord. Who was so bold? Who had such great ability to humiliate the West City Lord like this? The small building in the middle of the lake was different from other places. It was quiet, very suitable for nurturing the baby. Early in the morning, Fengjiu walked around the mansion. After moving around, she came to a pavilion and sat down. Master, the West City Lord was tricked by Hui Lang. I'm afraid he won't let it go. Moreover, the incident happened in the Medicine Tower. After today, the Medicine Tower will be targeted by the West City Lord. Leng Hua poured a glass of water for her and then stood to the side, telling her about the news that had spread outside in the morning. Don't worry, they will take care of it. Fengjiu drank the water in his cup and said, what's more, he has already fallen into the hands of Hui Lang. If this West City Lord knows what's good for him, he should swallow this loss. If he doesn't know what's good for him and wants to make a move on them, they can just drag West City Lord down and push someone else up. Hearing this, Leng Hua couldn't help but smile. This was their master. No matter what, he was always so confident. By the way, Master, we've received news that there are 3,000-year-old elixirs being auctioned in the city today. One of them seems to be the single-leaf rainbow flower that Master asked us to look for. I plan to go take a look later. If it's really the single-leaf rainbow flower, I'll bid for it. An auction in the city? Fengjiu rested his chin on his hand and said, I've been here for so long and haven't really gone out. Since there's an auction, I'll go with you. There are many people there. Now that Master is pregnant with little Master, are you afraid? Leng Hua was a little hesitant. Fengjiu smiled. It's okay. The baby is very normal now. It's okay even if he fights with people, let alone just go and watch the fun. Chapter 37:45. Master, have a bowl of porridge. Leng Xuan came over with the porridge and placed the tray in front of Fengjiu. Fengjiu ate the porridge and seemed to think of something. She said to Leng Xuan, Fan Lin and Hui Lang will probably stay in the medicine building for a while. Later, let Qin Xin go to the medicine building as well. Let her learn from Fan Lin how to make medicine. Yes, Leng Xuan replied. She stood there and did not leave. After arriving here, the people around her master began to expand their power. Only she and her brother, Leng Hua, stayed by her master's side. Ying Yi was always in the dark and rarely appeared in front of others. Although the others came back sometimes, most of them had to patrol the properties. Even Bai Qingqing was in charge of one of the properties and was responsible for gathering information. After being here for a few months, the only thing she was worried about now was her master's delivery. She only hoped that when the child was born, her master would have a safe and smooth delivery. After Leng Hua arranged everything, Fengjiu took the two of them out. The others wanted to follow, but were rejected by her. After all, in addition to Leng Hua and Leng Xuan, Ying Yi was in the dark. It was enough. The news of West City Lord being hung upside down and stripped naked spread like crazy in the city. In the West City Lord's mansion, West City Lord was rescued and brought back to the mansion. He rubbed his face until it turned red, but he could not get rid of the damn tortoise pattern on his face. Bang! In a fit of anger, he picked up the wash basin and smashed it on the ground. The water in the basin splashed everywhere, instantly turning the room into a mess. He angrily strode out, but as if he had thought of something, he went back into the room and rummaged through it. Finally, he took out a mask and put it on his face. Only then did he leave with a sinister look on his face. Gather the people for me. I'm going to destroy that medicine tower. In the West City Lord's hall, his malicious eyes were filled with ruthlessness and bloodthirstiness. His sinister voice was filled with a monstrous rage. Every time he thought about how he had made such a big fool of himself and how everyone in the city was talking about and laughing at him, he could not wait to exterminate everyone in the medicine tower. Leave no one alive. Killing intent filled the hall, causing everyone in the hall to hold their breaths. Among them, 2 old men and 2 middle-aged men looked at each other and signaled each other to step forward. What are you waiting for? Immediately gather everyone in the West City Prefecture. I want everyone in the medicine tower to die. He clenched his fist and slammed it heavily on the table. His voice, which contained the aura of spiritual power, almost spread throughout the entire West City Lord mansion. Seeing this, the two old men sighed and stepped forward. "City Lord, this is not appropriate." "Inappropriate?" The West City Lord narrowed his eyes, his malicious gaze seemed to want to swallow the old man alive. "You think it's okay to let a small medicine house humiliate me like this? It's not that I don't know who did it. I know who did it, so why can't I kill him? Do you want me to swallow this anger?" His tone was heavier than the previous one. His voice was filled with thunderous anger, and it was like a muffled thunder that smashed into everyone's hearts, causing their eardrums to hurt. A powerful coercion accompanied his anger, causing everyone in the hall to break out in cold sweat. Even sitting down, they felt frightened. Chapter 37-46. Hearing this, the West City Lord's malicious eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" The two old men did not speak directly, but said to the others in the hall, "You can leave first. We have something to discuss with the City Lord." When everyone heard this, they could not help but look at the City Lord. The West City Lord looked at the two old men and finally waved his hand. "Leave." "Yes." Everyone responded and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. After everyone else left, the West City Lord stared at the two old men and said, "Speak. I'd like to see what you can say." No matter what they said, he would definitely not take this lying down. The two old men looked at each other, and then one of them asked, "The City Lord went to the medicine tower to kill the second master of the Yu family?" Hearing this question directly, the West City Lord's eyes flashed slightly. He stared at the old man and said, "That's right. The second master of the Yu family deserves to die. The medicine tower that saved him deserves to die even more. City Lord, you went there secretly. If this matter is exposed, I'm afraid that the City Lord's reputation will plummet. This matter can't be brought up directly. What's more, the medicine tower is full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. The City Lord really doesn't need to sacrifice himself or even the power of the entire West City Guard for this." The other old man on the other side sighed softly and said, "With the City Lord's strength, if the medicine tower was an ordinary place, the City Lord alone could destroy it with one hand. But obviously, this medicine tower is not an ordinary place. There are crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Even the City Lord is no match for them. If we face them directly, we can only be at a disadvantage, and the consequences are unimaginable." Listening to the words of the two, the West City Lord's malicious eyes flashed slightly. He was silent and did not speak, as if he was thinking about their words. After a long time, he calmed down and leaned back in the chair behind him, asking, "What do you think?" The old man saw that his tone was slightly relaxed and hurriedly said, "City Lord, we have ways to get rid of them. There's no need to do it personally. Yes, we can borrow a knife to kill them, and we can also buy their lives." The other person also said. Hearing this, the West City Governor's mood gradually improved. He looked at the two of them and nodded, "Well said. If you want to kill them, why would you need to make a move against the forces of the West City? If this City Lord wants to kill them, there are plenty of ways." As soon as he finished speaking, a wisp of ghastly killing intent flashed through his malicious eyes, and he said, "Then I'll leave this matter to you. The top assassin organization is Night Flame, go buy their lives. I want them to bring their heads to me. Don't worry, City Lord. We will contact Yi Yen as soon as possible to buy the lives of those people in the medicine building." The two old men said. After cupping their hands, they left. On the other side, in the East City Lord's mansion, everything in the mansion was being cleaned up. The clansmen of the previous City Lord had already moved out early in the morning. Inside and outside, Chi Kong had ordered people to reorganize everything. In addition, Du Fan was here to help, so it was much more convenient to deal with everything. After finally resting for a while, Chi Kong and Du Fan found a pavilion to sit down and discuss some matters. Before they finished their tea, they saw Duan Yunhe walking towards them. Chapter 37-47. Du Fan and Chi Kong raised their eyebrows at the same time. They looked at the confident Duan Yunhe and asked, "What do you mean?" Duan Yunhe walked forward and sat down before he said, "The city governor of the Western District has an elder who's the peak master of the High Firmament Celestial sect. Aren't you afraid that he'll take revenge on you for attacking him?" Chi Kong had been busy with the matters in the city governor's mansion and had not heard anything about what had happened outside. Although Du Fan did not know what had happened, he remembered that his master had sent Hui Lang to the medicine pavilion when Duan Yunhe mentioned the Western District governor. What happened to the city governor of the Western District? Du Fan took a sip of tea and asked curiously. Duan Yunhe glanced at the two of them and paused for a moment before he said, "This morning, the city governor of the Western District was hung on the competition stage. He was stripped down to his underwear and a turtle was drawn on his face. The news has spread like wildfire. Everyone is trying to find out who did it." "Oh. So that's how it is." Du Fan smiled, but there was no surprise on his face. Only their people would do such a thing. Duan Yunhe shook his head when he saw that the two of them did not seem to care about this matter. He said, "I'm here to bid farewell. I still have some matters to attend to, so I won't be staying here for long. If you need any help in the future, you can look for me." He handed his identity jade token to them as he spoke. Chi Kong thought for a moment before he accepted the identity jade token. "Thank you." Although he did not think that he would need it much, he still owed Duan Yunhe a favor. Duan Yunhe seemed to have something to say, but he did not know how to say it. In the end, he stood up and said, "We'll meet again someday." "We'll send you off," Chi Kong said as he stood up. Du Fan also stood up when he saw this. He smiled at Duan Yunhe and said, "We don't know each other anymore. I'll treat you to a drink the next time we meet." Hearing this, Duan Yunhe smiled. "Then I'll remember it." Chi Kong and Du Fan walked him out of the city lord's mansion. After watching his figure disappear into the distance, the two of them returned. As they walked, Chi Kong asked, "Who did this?" "He, who else could it be? It must be Hui Lang." Du Fan gently fanned the fan in his hand and said, "I thought that the West City Lord would only send someone over. I didn't expect him to go over himself. It's already good that Hui Lang didn't cripple him. After all, he's the lord of a city. You've seen how many things have happened here. A city lord has a lot of forces behind him. It's easy to cripple him, but it's not easy to deal with the trouble behind him. They probably thought of this point, so they didn't kill him." Chi Kong walked inside with his hands behind his back, slowly analyzing the situation. "Although you've taken over here, if you want the people under you to obey you, you'll probably have to put in a lot of effort. Do you need me to ask Master to send someone over to help you?" Du Fan asked. Then just send a lot of people over. I'm preparing to retrain the city guards in the East District and pick out a group of elite guards." The two of them chatted as they walked. When they returned to the pavilion, they sat down and continued to discuss matters. Chapter 37-48. Knock, knock. A sound came from outside the door. Leng Hua walked forward and opened the door halfway. Looking at the middle-aged manager outside, he asked gently, "What's the matter?" The manager of the Southern City Auction House looked at the half-open door and the gentleman standing inside. His eyes flashed slightly as he smiled and said, "Young Master Leng, I've sent you a number plate and a list of items to be auctioned later." From the corner of his eye, he faintly caught a glimpse of a red figure in the room. According to the people in the auction house, the madam in red was pregnant. Her face was covered by a light veil, so her appearance couldn't be seen clearly. However, her bearing and bearing were extraordinary. Beside her were this young Master Lang and a woman in black. "Thank you." Lang Hua took it and glanced at the items in his hand. "If there's anything else you need, just let me know." The middle-aged manager bowed and left without looking too much. After he left, Lang Hua closed the door and brought the items to the table in front of Fengjiu. "Master, this is the list of items to be auctioned." Fengjiu propped her head with one hand and flipped through the items recorded on the list with the other. When she saw a few rare spiritual herbs, she couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. This spirit immortal city is really extraordinary. They even have the means to get such spiritual herbs. After looking through the items that were going to be auctioned, she told Lang Hua to bid for the items that were going to be auctioned off. However, while they were waiting for the auction to begin, they heard angry shouts and comforting voices coming from outside. "My family has been working with you for so long, and now you're saying that you don't have a private room? Is this how you do business?" In the corridor, a man in his 30s dressed in brocade roared angrily at the middle-aged manager. Beside him were two young men, a middle-aged man, and three servants. "Hee, young Master Li, I'm really sorry. You know that our private rooms have to be reserved in advance. There are so many people, and we only have 4 private rooms. Now that there are distinguished guests inside, we really can't make room for you." The middle-aged manager maintained a smile on his face. As he comforted them, he said, "How about this? Please take a seat on the auction stage. I'll arrange a seat for you at the front. If it were any other day, it would be fine. But today, I'm here with my friends. How can I sit down there?" The man in embroidered clothes didn't appreciate it. His gaze swept across the 4 private rooms in front of him. He saw that there were 2 guards standing at the door of 3 of them, and only one of them was empty. Seeing this, his eyes flickered. As he walked towards the private room, he asked, "Who's inside?" As he spoke, he extended his hand to push open the door. However, when the middle-aged manager who had been standing to the side with a smile saw this, his figure flashed and instantly blocked the door of the private room, stopping the man from pushing open the door. "Young Master Li, this is not appropriate. It will disturb our guests." As the middle-aged manager spoke, the smile on his face faded a little. He looked at them and said, "The auction is about to begin. If young Master Li doesn't want to sit down below, you can leave first." "Are you chasing us away?" Young Master Li's face darkened, and his tone was filled with strong dissatisfaction. Chapter 37-49. Hearing these words, young Master Li raised his chin and sneered, "Today, I'm here on my father's orders to accompany a few old friends. Since that's the case, we can only invite young Master Li and the others to the first floor." The middle-aged steward gestured for them to enter. Seeing this, a man at the side smiled and said, "Steward, we really have something to discuss. How about this? Can you ask the guests in this private room if they can let us have this private room? We can give them some compensation." The middle-aged steward's face twitched slightly when he heard this. He didn't even raise his eyes to look at the man. He just narrowed his eyes and gestured for them to enter. Why would a guest who could come here and be invited into a private room care about some so-called compensation? If he didn't even understand this point, he really couldn't be bothered to talk to him. Seeing that the middle-aged steward didn't move at all as if he was asleep, didn't say a word, and didn't even raise his eyes, the man who spoke couldn't help but feel embarrassed. His face turned slightly red, and just as he was about to step forward, the middle-aged man pressed on his shoulder. "Nephew Li, we're actually forcing you today. After all, there are no more private rooms available. Let's go to the first floor. It's fine, we're here for the auction, but for this private room. If we make a fuss, it'll make things difficult for the auction house." The middle-aged man smiled with a kind expression. He looked at the middle-aged steward and said with a smile, "Then I'll have to trouble the steward to make the arrangements for us." Hearing this, the middle-aged steward raised his eyes to look at him and replied with a smile, "That's what I should do. It's no trouble at all." He then said to the group, "Everyone, please follow me." When the people in the private rooms heard the commotion outside, some shook their heads and ignored it, some chuckled and threw it to the back of their minds, and some even looked at it with contempt. In Fengjiu's private room, it was still quiet. This was because Fengjiu, who was originally sitting, was lying down on the soft couch. She squinted her eyes and smiled lazily like a cat. When the time came, the auction also began. Fengjiu was lying down facing the auction stage, so when the first item was placed on the stage, she looked at it. Although he was a bit far away, he was still a cultivator with a decent cultivation base. With his divine sense locked onto the object, he was able to roughly see what it was. Because she had instructed Leng Hua to bid for the item, she just watched. She watched as the auctioneer on the stage announced the starting price, followed by the sound of people bidding one after another. 23,000 crystals. Leng Hua called out the price. His voice came out from the window. However, the people below could not see him, but he could see the people below. 23,500 crystals. Someone raised the bid by 500 crystals, but Leng Hua's next bid silenced the crowd. 30,000 crystals, Leng Hua said, his voice spreading throughout the auction house. 30,000 crystal stones going once. 30,000 crystal stones going twice. 30,000 crystal stones going thrice. Again. The auctioneer looked at the private room on the second floor and said with a smile, "This Millennium Warm Jade was won by the guest in private room number 1 upstairs. Next is the second item to be auctioned. It's a 6th level mid-grade spiritual medicine. The starting price is 3,000 crystal stones, and each increment must be no less than 500 crystals." Chapter 3750. 30,000 crystal stones was not a small amount, and the person in the private room on the second floor had used 30,000 crystal stones to buy a piece of 1,000-year-old warm jade that was only the size of an egg. That direct increase in price and that gentle and indifferent voice made people feel that 30,000 crystal stones was nothing in his eyes. To be able to spend so much money, it was likely that he was from a large family in the city. They looked sympathetically at the few young men sitting at the side. Just now, it was the young master of the Li family who was bidding for the Millennium Warm Jade. Unfortunately, with their family background, there was no way they could compete with a first-rate family. Not long after, the middle-aged steward personally came over with the Millennium Warm Jade to handle the handover. Leng Shuang opened the door and let him in. When the middle-aged steward came in, he saw that the veil on the woman in red's face had been removed. With just a glance, he was so shocked that he did not dare to take another look. "Madam, young Master Leng, this is the Millennium Warm Jade. Please examine it." He placed the Millennium Warm Jade on the tray in front of Fengjiu and bent down slightly to make it easier for Fengjiu to examine it. Fengjiu lifted the red cloth and took out the egg-sized piece of Millennium Warm Jade to examine. The warm feeling in her hand was very comfortable. The jade contained a pure aura of spiritual power. Although the jade was not big, the jade was transparent like water, and the emerald green color was very pleasing. She played with it in her hand and smiled, "Not bad, this is the Millennium Warm Jade. It's full of spiritual power and is worth the money." After holding it in her hand, she realized that this piece of jade was not expensive at 30,000 crystal stones. Something like this could only be encountered and not sought. If she carried it with her and nurtured it for a few years, it would be even more nourishing. "As long as Master likes it," Leng Hua smiled and said to the steward, "Do I pass the bill here or at the counter? I'll have to trouble young Master Leng to walk a few steps. Because the bill is at the counter, I'm only responsible for delivering the auction item to the guest for inspection." Hearing this, Leng Hua nodded and said to Leng Shuang, "Sister, I'll have to trouble you to settle the bill. I still want to bid for the next item." "Okay," Leng Shuang replied. At this time, Leng Hua looked at the manager again and said, "We have a few items to bid for. Can you ask my sister at the counter to record the bill? We can pay after we bid for the items and leave." Of course, that's not a problem. Miss, you can sign a contract with me first, and you can pay the bill after it's over. The butler hurriedly said with a smile as he gestured to Ling Shuang, "Miss, please." The steward was surprised. So they were a pair of siblings. Ling Shuang followed the steward out, while Ling Hua looked at the items being auctioned on the stage. As the bids from below grew higher and higher, fewer and fewer people were bidding. He saw the opportunity and opened his mouth to bid again. Ling Shuang, who followed the steward out, went to the counter on the first floor and went through the formalities. She took out 30,000 crystal stones and paid for the millennium-worn jade first. When the middle-aged steward saw her take out the crystal stones from her space, his eyelids twitched, and then he hurriedly helped her pay the bill. Finally, he smiled and said, "Miss, that's enough. You can pay for the rest when you leave." Wasn't this woman a servant? She could actually take out 30,000 crystal stones at once. How incredible. Okay. Chapter 3751. "Ah, I'm so sorry, miss, I didn't mean to bump into you." The man repeatedly apologized, but there was no trace of apology on his face. Instead, there was a hint of flirtation in his eyes. Ling Shuang's face turned cold, and a murderous aura burst out from her body. The strong murderous aura startled the middle-aged steward, and he looked at her in astonishment. He was just about to send her back when he saw the three men walking over while chatting and laughing. It seemed that he had stumbled and bumped into her, and that man had taken advantage of her. Thinking of this, he looked at the cold face of the woman in black, and then at the man. He couldn't help but frown slightly. These hedonistic sons of rich parents were really too much. Ling Shuang's heart surged with anger. Because she didn't notice the murderous aura, and because she was careless, she didn't have time to dodge. When she thought of how she had been taken advantage of by the man in front of her, her frosty face became even colder. "Miss, you're so beautiful. Which family's young Mrs. servant are you?" One of the three men saw that the beauty in front of him was wearing a tight black robe. The black robe outlined the curves of her body, and coupled with her frosty face, it was extremely seductive. Their eyes couldn't help but fill with amazement, and they even took a step forward. Looking at the way the woman in black was dressed, it was obvious that she wasn't a young miss of an aristocratic family. However, her temperament was extraordinary, and the more she was like this, the more seductive they felt. Ling Shuang didn't pay attention to the others. Her gaze fell on the man who had bumped into her and touched her. She coldly said, "Which hand did you use to touch me?" Hearing this, the three men were stunned. They looked at each other and laughed. It was as if they didn't notice Ling Shuang's murderous aura, and their faces were still full of ridicule. Especially the man who had taken advantage of Ling Shuang, the corners of his mouth curled up wickedly. He raised his right hand and said cheekily, "Miss, it was this hand that touched you. To be honest, you're..." "Ah!" Before he finished speaking, the man let out a blood-curdling scream. His blood-curdling scream instantly resounded throughout the auction house, even overshadowing the sounds of the auctioneers shouting their bids. The people on and off the stage all looked in the direction of the voice in surprise. They only knew that it came from behind the counter, but they didn't know what had happened. However, the sound was too mournful. Some people still sent their attendants over to take a look. The people of the auction house also quickly came to the counter at the back. To be able to open such an auction house in this city, there was no need to mention the power of the owner. Just this auction house alone had many hidden experts. Therefore, generally speaking, no one would seek their own death by looking for trouble here. However, when they followed the sound to the counter behind the counter, they were all shocked by what they saw. A woman in black held a sword that was covered in blood, and a young man in luxurious clothes was seated before her. However, the man's right hand had been chopped off at the wrist, causing blood to splatter all over the ground. A severed palm that was covered in blood had fallen by the woman's feet. Chapter 37:52. The man who was screaming on the ground was so frightened by this scene that his crotch was wet with sweat. His eyes rolled back and he fainted. The two men next to him were also shocked. At this moment, they clearly felt the terrifying killing intent in the air, which made them tremble with fear. The middle-aged steward was also shocked when he saw this scene. He didn't expect the woman in black to chop off the man's hand as soon as she made a move. He also didn't expect her to crush the severed hand with her foot. He only knew that this scene shocked him so much that even he, who had been in charge of the auction house for many years and had seen many scenes, was shocked. When the crowd who had rushed over saw this scene, they couldn't help but look at each other. They wondered in their hearts, who is this woman in black? How dare she make a move in the auction house? Does she want to die? They thought that the auction house's people would arrest her, but unexpectedly, the steward said to the crowd after recovering from his shock, "This is a personal grudge between the two of them. Everyone, please go back." Then, he said to the two men who were scared pale, "You two, please send this young master back first." The two men's faces were pale, but they recovered at this time. One of them said, "He had an accident in your auction house. You want us to send him back like this?" As he spoke, the man looked at Ling Shuang and threatened in a trembling voice, do you know who he is? You dared to chop off his hand. His family won't let this go." Ling Shuang wiped her sword and glanced at him coldly. She turned around and walked back. However, she was stopped by someone after taking a few steps. "Miss, the auction house has its rules. You have made a move here, so I can only ask you to leave now." A middle-aged man stopped Ling Shuang and shook his head inwardly. In the end, she was still a woman. She was still a little impulsive. His family wouldn't let this go easily after she chopped off that man's hand. She was still too young to cause trouble on impulse. Ling Shuang heard this and frowned slightly. She looked at the middle-aged man in front of her and said, "I'll leave after I tell my master." Hearing this, the middle-aged man took a step back and let her pass. He then followed behind her to the second floor. Seeing them leave, the steward hurriedly ordered the people below to clean up the floor and quickly followed them to the second floor. The auction continued, but many people knew what had happened behind the counter. They knew that if the people from that clan knew about it, they would definitely rush over. It was likely that the black-clothed woman would be killed on the spot in a short while. Since it had nothing to do with them, they just listened out of curiosity. Inside, they knew that even if chaos broke out, there would be people from the auction house to maintain the scene. As for fighting, they wouldn't be here. Therefore, they continued to look at the auction items on the stage with ease and continued to bid. She. Chapter 37:53. When Ling Shuang heard this, his lips moved, but in the end, he didn't say anything. He just looked at Fengjiu. When Ling Hua heard that his sister had been taken advantage of after going downstairs, his gentle face turned cold. However, after hearing his master's words, he couldn't help but smile. "Go. Wait for us outside. There are still a few medicinal ingredients left. After bidding for them, we can go back," Fengjiu said, motioning for her to leave first. She let Ling Shuang go out not because of anything else, but because she knew that the family of the man who had his hand chopped off by Ling Shuang should be arriving soon. After all, this was an auction house. She couldn't break the rules of others. Another reason was to let Ling Shuang handle this matter herself. "Yes." Ling Shuang replied. He said to Ling Hua, "Take good care of master." Then he turned and walked out. Outside, the middle-aged man who came with them but didn't go in stood outside the door. When he heard the unrestrained conversation from inside, the middle-aged man's mouth twitched. That master, he actually thought that chopping off one of the man's hands was too easy on him. He should have chopped off the man's offspring as well. What kind of master was he? Why did he not play by the rules? Just as he was thinking, the door opened. The woman in black walked out and closed the door. She didn't even look at him as she walked out. Seeing this, he glanced at the tightly shut door and quickly followed the black-clothed woman to the first floor. It was only when he saw her leave the first floor and stand quietly outside the auction house that he returned to his room. As they expected, the man's family quickly arrived with their men. The two people leading the way pointed at the woman in black standing outside the auction house and shouted, "That's her. That's her." The middle-aged man in the lead looked forward with a cold gaze. When his gaze landed on the woman in black, a murderous intent burst out from his body. "Capture her. I'm going to chop off her hands to avenge my son." When the voice containing spiritual power sounded out, the 4 cultivators behind him quickly rushed forward. The other cultivators formed a circle around the woman to prevent her from escaping. 4 figures dashed over and reached out to grab her shoulders. Leng Shuang narrowed her eyes and glanced at them. In a flash, the black figure disappeared from the spot. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of something that sounded like a kick rang out. The 4 cultivators who had rushed forward suddenly retreated. There was a footprint on each of their chests. The hidden force of the kick caused them to slow down for a while before they could catch their breath. However, the moment they moved, the pain in their chests assaulted them, causing their expressions to change greatly. Useless trash. The middle-aged man in the lead angrily. He reached out his hand and grabbed Leng's throat. "I'll kill you." When Leng Shuang saw the middle-aged man's attack filled with killing intent, he moved and kicked out again. When the middle-aged man saw Leng Shuang move, he immediately retreated and began to fight with her. The 2 figures exchanged blows and after a while, the middle-aged man let out a muffled groan as he was hit by a palm strike. He staggered backward. "You!" Chapter 3754. Which family's servant are you? How dare you be so rude and impudent? Tell your master to come out. I want to ask him how he teaches his servants. The middle-aged man shouted angrily, suppressing his anger as he glared at Leng Shuang. Leng Shuang glanced at him indifferently and said, "You want to see my master? You're overestimating yourself. How dare you?" He bellowed angrily, and his voice, which contained a powerful pressure, rushed towards Leng Shuang. He wanted to use his pressure to suppress her, but she seemed unaffected by his pressure. Before he could speak again, he heard the black-robed woman's voice, which contained a powerful pressure. "If you don't want to die, leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, I'll make you regret coming here." Leng Shuang said coldly as he glanced at the people around him. The threat was obvious. "What an arrogant bitch!" the middle-aged man scolded. Then, he heard a slap. Slap. The sound of a palm wind slapping was very clear and crisp. That sound was heard by everyone in the surroundings. Each and every one of them stared at the black-clothed woman with wide eyes in shock. She stood there without moving a single step. However, she raised her hand and a gust of wind shot out from her palm. That gust of wind actually slapped the middle-aged man's face. The force of the blow was so great that his entire body instantly fell to the ground. A trace of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. "Master!" Those people cried out in alarm and quickly went forward to help him up. The middle-aged man was shocked. He never thought that one day he would be slapped by a little girl. Slapped by a servant. If he didn't tear her to pieces today, who would listen to him in the future? "Master, master, are you okay?" The cultivators who helped him up quickly asked. The middle-aged man pushed them away and stared coldly at the woman in black. In the next moment, he moved his hand and a sharp sword with a cold light appeared in his hand. He swung the sword and sword chi instantly attacked Ling Xuang. Ling Xuang dashed forward the moment his sword struck out. She did not even draw her sword. Instead, she faced it with her bare hands. After all, with her strength, even if she did not use a weapon, that person would not be a match for her. Outside, the two of them were exchanging blows, each one filled with ruthless killing intent. Inside the auction house, the cultivators guarding the auction house on the top floor were using their divine senses to observe the fight. The more they watched, the more surprised they became. The master of the Chen family is no match for the woman in black. Yes, the woman in black is much stronger than him. It's just that in his rage, clan leader Chen didn't investigate carefully. He originally came to vent his anger for his son, but now even he himself is trapped in this mess. If he doesn't leave quickly, I'm afraid he won't live to see the sun tomorrow. The woman in black only needs to use her killing move. She'll take his life within 3 moves. As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd fell silent. The middle-aged man's body stiffened and his eyes widened. The sword in his hand fell to the ground. Master. Seeing their family head killed, those cultivators were in a mess. Wasn't it said that she was just a little servant girl? How could she be so strong? Chapter 3755. I don't know which family she's from, but I saw her when she came in. She came in with a red-clothed madam, but the red-clothed madam didn't even show her face. She didn't even need to show her face. That black-clothed woman already took care of the matter. As one person spoke, he stroked his beard and sighed, it looks like the city won't be peaceful. There are so many people guarding Spirit Immortal City, so it's impossible for it to fall into chaos. However, after today, that black-clothed woman's reputation will probably spread far and wide. If the Chen family is tactful, they should suppress this matter. Otherwise, if they continue to cause trouble, their entire family will be wiped out. A few of the guards in the building were discussing what happened outside the auction house. When they found out that the black-clothed woman's master was in the private room, they couldn't help but be slightly surprised. Their master actually didn't show himself and allowed a servant girl to take care of the matter herself. Looking at the Chen family head lying on the ground with his throat cut, the guards of the auction house shook their heads and inwardly sighed, what a pity. A dignified family head was killed because of such a small matter. What a pity. Recently, I heard that many new forces have appeared in the city. Moreover, the people in charge of these forces are all very strong. However, their origins are mysterious and no one knows where they came from. Who is their master? Outside, the Chen family members carried the corpse back and quickly left, not daring to stay for long. It could only be said that when they came, they were filled with grief and indignation, but now, they didn't dare to stay. They quickly carried the corpse back. That black-clothed woman was too strong. They weren't her match at all. They could only hope that someone in the family could deal with her. However, when the Chen family members returned, they quickly went to invite their ancestor. Unexpectedly, the first thing their ancestor said was, chase them out. Scram to the branch family. Old ancestor. The Chen family members looked at their ruddy but angry old man in astonishment. None of them expected him to give such an order. Each of you go and receive 30 beatings. Remember this lesson. The old man coldly glanced at them, especially the family members of the Chen family. Ancestor, ancestor, you must help the master. A woman cried as she knelt in front of the Chen family's ancestor. However, when the Dong family's ancestor saw this, his expression darkened. Make the decision. What a good son you raised. How many times have I told you? I told you to keep your temper in check, but none of you listened. Now that something has happened, you want me to make the decision. Although he was the ancestor of the Chen family, he was not the biological father of the Chen family head, but his uncle. Therefore, when he heard that he had been killed, his first thought was to quickly arrange for another person to take over the position of the Chen family head. Moreover, he wanted to find out which family the black-clothed woman belonged to. Otherwise, he wouldn't know that he had formed a grudge. Feng Jiu, who didn't take this matter to heart, looked at the items on the table and revealed a satisfied smile. These items are all in my hands. Go and settle the bill. Let's go back. As she spoke, she put the items into her space, packed up, and prepared to leave. However, when they opened the door, they saw a middle-aged man and an old man wearing the clothes of the auction house standing outside. Chapter 3756. The middle-aged man from the auction house smiled and looked past Leng Hua. His gaze paused on the lady in red for a moment before he looked away and said to Leng Hua, "Young Master Leng, we've already brought your carriage and the lady to the back door. You can leave through the back door. There are already many people watching the front door." Although the people in the auction house were curious about their identities, they knew that they couldn't afford to offend these people. Especially after seeing the lady in black's shocking battle prowess, they knew that these people weren't ordinary people. Now that there were many people watching them, wanting to know their origins, the auction house was letting them leave through the back door to make things easier for them and avoid those people. Feng Jiu, wearing a veil, slowly walked out and said with a smile, "Since that's the case, many thanks." Seeing this, Leng Hua nodded and said to Feng Jiu, "Master, be careful of the doorway." Then he walked out with her. "I'll lead the way for you too," the middle-aged man said as he strode forward and led them to the back door. When they reached the first floor and were about to walk to the back door, a voice sounded. "The two of you, please wait." The middle-aged man leading the way was slightly surprised. He stopped and turned around to take a look. He saw a middle-aged man and three young men standing not far away. He said to Leng Hui and Feng Jiu, "You two, follow this straight and you'll reach it." As he spoke, he walked towards them and asked, "Is there anything I can help you with?" Seeing that the lady in red and the man didn't even look back, the middle-aged man quickly stepped forward and shouted, "I want to exchange medicinal ingredients with you too. Are you interested?" Feng Jiu didn't look back and continued walking at a leisurely pace. Leng Hua looked back and smiled, not interested. Then he followed Feng Jiu to the back. Then the middle-aged man still wanted to go forward, but he was blocked by the people from the auction house. "If you want to leave, please go through the front door," the middle-aged man from the auction house said as he gestured for him to leave. The three young men standing behind him looked at each other. One of them wanted to step forward, but when he saw the middle-aged man's sullen face, he couldn't help but withdraw his foot. The middle-aged man's eyes flashed when he saw the two of them leave. He looked at the auctioneer and asked, "May I know which mansion those two are from?" "No comment," the auctioneer said, still making an inviting gesture. When he saw this, the middle-aged man cupped his hands and left with the three people behind him. Several thousand-year-old elixirs had been bought by the same person. It could be said that many people had their eyes on the guest in the private room. Therefore, when they saw the auction house staff sending them out through the back door, some people also got up and left. At the back door of the auction house, Ling Shuang was waiting in a carriage. When he saw them, he went to help Feng Jiu into the carriage. She also got in the carriage to accompany him. Leng Hua was in charge of driving the carriage. The carriage slowly moved down a small path and left. After watching them leave, the two people from the auction house looked at each other and walked in. However, just as they entered, a few groups of people secretly followed behind them and headed towards the small path. Chapter 3757. Do I look like someone who's afraid of trouble? Feng Jiu smiled and leaned against the carriage lazily. He covered his stomach with one hand and said, "Others are courting death, you're just sending them on their way. As the saying goes, if others don't offend me, I won't offend them. If others offend me, why should I endure? Besides, it's not like I can't beat them. Hearing her casual words, Leng Shuang's face softened. She was not a good talker, so seeing that her master didn't blame her, she was relieved. Leng Shuang. You two have been with me for so many years, and I have many outstanding men and women around me. Don't tell me you two don't like any of them. Fengjiu looked at Leng Shuang with a smile, his face full of expectation. Leng Shuang was taken aback by the sudden change in topic. Her expression froze for a moment before she shook her head. No. She had never thought of this question. Moreover, just like what her master had said, there were too many outstanding men and women around her master. She had always been by the side watching and interacting with them, so she really did not have any feelings towards any outstanding men. After all, she had seen even more outstanding men. Fengjiu took out 2 spiritual fruits from his space and threw one to her. He took a bite and said with a smile, you should also take care of your marriage. If it wasn't for the fact that you and Du Fan are too familiar with each other, they would be a good choice. After all, they were all taught by me. Even the young masters of aristocratic families can't compare to them. Hearing this, a smile appeared on Leng Shuang's face. However, the smile disappeared as soon as it appeared. She frowned slightly and said, Mistress, someone is following us. Yes, they're following us from the auction house. They're probably after the things we bought. Fengjiu said casually as he ate the spiritual fruit. I'll go out and stop them. Leng Shuang said and put the spiritual fruit on the table. She opened the curtain and went outside. She said to Leng Hua, take master back first. I'll stop them and then go back. If they followed them back to the small house in the middle of the lake, the following days would not be peaceful. She had to stop them so that they wouldn't disturb her master. Big sister, be careful. Leng Hua said as he watched her jump off the carriage and continue to drive the carriage forward. The several groups of people following in the dark were surprised to see a black-robed woman jump down from the carriage. Just as they were about to chase after her, they saw a flash of light in the woman's hand and several sharp sword chi instantly attacked them. Xiao! Xiao! Several streams of sword chi flew out, forcing out the few groups of people hiding in the dark. The people who had jumped out from the shadows to avoid the attack appeared in a sorry state. Some of them were not fast enough and their robes were cut by the chi blade. Some of them were shocked by the sword chi. For a moment, all of them stared angrily at Leng Shuang. What are you doing? You're courting death. Because these people were originally in the auction house, they didn't know that the person who killed the Chen family head outside was the black-clothed woman in front of them. Now that their path was blocked and they were almost injured by her sword chi, their anger immediately surged. Leng Shuang pointed her sword at the ground. Her cold eyes swept across their faces and she said, if you don't want to die, you'd better leave now. Chapter 3758. Leng Shuang didn't say anything. Instead, he twirled the sharp sword in his hand and a cold light shot out. His murderous aura spread out like ripples in the water, startling the crowd and causing them to quickly retreat. Don't ask about things you shouldn't know. You don't have the right to ask. Leng Shuang coldly swept his gaze over them and released a powerful aura. In the next moment, he swung his sword in front of him. Sword chi and dust flew into the air and spread out in all directions. When the dust and sword chi settled down, the crowd looked again but the black-robed woman was nowhere to be seen. No one said anything. They only pursed their lips and looked at the sword mark on the ground. There was a lingering fear in their hearts. Outside the auction house, I heard that the person who killed the family head was a black-robed woman. Someone suddenly asked, as if thinking of something. Hearing this, the others looked at each other in dismay. It seemed so. But we were all inside and didn't see what the black-robed woman looked like. We only know that she chopped off a man's hand in the auction house before being asked to leave. The crowd fell silent. They seemed to have guessed something. They looked at each other and didn't say anything else as they left one after another. On the other side of the street, Leng Hua stopped at the side of the street. He bought some things from a shop on the street and put them into the carriage. "Master, these pastries are freshly made and are still warm." Fengjiu took them from the carriage and said, "Let's go. Let's go back to the residence." "Yes." Leng Hua replied and continued to drive the carriage away. When they reached the entrance of the residence, Leng Shuang followed them. "Master." She stepped forward to help Fengjiu get off the carriage and said, "I've stopped all the people on the road, but I guess there will be a lot of people asking about Master. I think it won't be long before the news that Master lives here will be known by outsiders." After all, they were in Spirit Immortal City and didn't hide their movements. As long as they used their power to ask around, they would be able to find out about them. "It's all right," Fengjiu said as he strode inside. He said indifferently, "Even if they know that we live here, they won't know who we are. This place is so closed off from the other continents. It's very difficult to find out about our origins." "Master, you're back." Du Fan, who was inside, saw Fengjiu and the others come in and came forward with a smile. "Why are you back? Did you go to Qi Kong to help?" Fengjiu asked as he walked inside. "Qi Kang's side is almost done. Moreover, with the help of the immortal sex people, the handover will be easier. I saw that there was nothing else, so I came back to take a look." He fanned the fan in his hand and asked with a smile, "It's rare for Master to go out. I heard from the people in the manor that Master went to the auction house. Did you buy anything that you like?" "Yes, I did bid for a lot of good stuff." Fengjiu smiled. After sitting down in the pavilion, she flipped her hand and took out the egg-sized Millennium Warm Jade. "Du Fan, take this Millennium Warm Jade and find an engraver to help me make a pair of jade pendants. I'm planning to let my children wear them in front of their chests. As for the design, I'll draw it for you later." Chapter 3759. He handed the piece of jade to Fengjiu and said with a smile, "Master, you should keep this piece of jade by your side for now. Once I've found an engraver and you've finished drawing the blueprint, I'll come and get it." Now that his master was pregnant, it would be good for her body to keep this piece of 1,000-year-old jade by her side. Moreover, he wouldn't be able to engrave it in a short period of time. Hearing his words, Fengjiu was startled for a moment before she smiled, "That's fine too." She took the jade back and played with it in her hands, saying, "For the next few days, I'll probably stay in the alchemy department to refine pills. If you have any matters to attend to, you can deal with them yourselves. Also, you have to hurry up with the things I gave you." "Master, don't worry. The people below have been investigating and we've also received news that the Devil Lord hasn't appeared during this period of time. The mainland over there is now a large piece of land and nothing major has happened." Fengjiu nodded and waved her hand, indicating for them to leave. She sat down in the pavilion to rest for a while. At this time, Leng Shuang came in with tea. After placing it on the table, he asked, "Master, do you want to go back and rest?" "No need. My body isn't that weak." Fengjiu smiled. After taking a sip of tea, she stood up and walked towards the alchemy department. Seeing this, Leng Shuang hurriedly followed. In the alchemy department, Fengjiu wasn't refining pills. Instead, she was concocting medicinal liquids. She was preparing to concoct medicinal liquids from the medicine she bought today with some of the herbs in her space. She was going to use it to protect Moza's heart and replenish his nutrients. Thus, as soon as she obtained the elixir, she threw herself into the quiet alchemy department to concoct medicinal liquids. Because there was no one to help her, she saw Leng Shuang standing guard outside the courtyard and called out, "Leng Shuang, come and help me." Now that she was pregnant with twins, it was inconvenient for her to move around. She was busy bending down to pick up things and so on. Soon, she was so tired that sweat seeped out of her forehead. Fengjiu and Leng Shuang were busy and stayed in the alchemy courtyard for 2 days and 1 night. During these 2 days and 1 night, Fengjiu did not rest at all. Seeing this, everyone in the residence was extremely anxious, but they did not dare to disturb her. After all, during the refining process, what Master disliked the most was to be interrupted. It was very likely that the refining of the medicinal liquid would be interrupted and fail. When Hui Lang returned to the residence and found out that Fengjiu and Leng Shuang had stayed in the alchemy department for so long, he couldn't help but reveal a worried expression. Madam is still pregnant with little master. Can her body take it if she doesn't rest? He paced back and forth outside the courtyard, looking in anxiously. However, there was no one in the alchemy courtyard. At this moment, the two of them were in the refining room, and no one outside could see them at all. This won't do, I have to find Fan Lin and ask if Madam's body can take this situation. Hui Lang said to Du Fan and Leng Hua. Just as he was about to leave, he heard Leng Hua's surprised voice. Master is out. When Hui Lang heard this, he hurriedly turned around and saw a door in the courtyard open. Fengjiu, who looked slightly tired, was supported out by Leng Shuang. Seeing her, Hui Lang hurriedly went forward. Madam? How are you? Is your body all right? Quick, sit down and rest first. He hurriedly helped Fengjiu to a chair at the side and sat down. Chapter 3760. Madam, do you want to eat something first? Or do you want to go back and sleep first? Hui Lang asked, worried that her body couldn't take it. Fengjiu took a sip of the water handed by Leng Wan, moistened her throat, and said, let people prepare some food. I'll go back and take a bath before eating. Saying this, she stood up and said to Du Fan and the others, you don't have to stay here, go do what you need to do. Yes. Du Fan and the others responded, looked at each other, and then left first. Fengjiu returned to the courtyard and took a bath. She lay down and rested for a while, only to feel that her body was lying on the soft bed, and her whole body relaxed. She softly exhaled, and one hand instinctively stroked her bulging belly, and the corner of her mouth slightly revealed a smile. After resting for about the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, the Leng Shuang outside came in with something. Master, eat a bowl of porridge first. Put it on the table. Fengjiu said, without opening her eyes, just let her put it down, and then motioned for her to leave. Leng Shuang put down the porridge, looked at her, and then retreated and closed the door. After a while, Fengjiu got up and ate the porridge on the table, and then flashed into the space. She came to the ice bed, looked at the sleeping Xianyuan Mose, and couldn't help but reach out and touch his face. The cold feeling made her heart ache. He should have been by her side, but now, one by one, he was lying on this cold ice bed, sleeping soundly. Mose, don't worry, I refined a new medicine today, it should be good for your body. She said softly, leaned over and kissed his lips. She took out the refined medicine. The transparent glass medicine bottle's blue liquid was flowing, and the spiritual aura inside could be faintly seen. She had used dozens of precious medicinal herbs to refine this bottle of medicinal liquid. In the end, she had only managed to refine half a bottle of medicinal liquid essence. Because it was a newly refined medicinal liquid, she didn't know how effective it would be. He could only let him try it out first while observing his physical condition. She twisted open the bottle, and in an instant, a strong medicinal fragrance assailed her nostrils. She gently opened his mouth and poured half of the medicinal liquid into his mouth. She raised his chin slightly and let the medicinal liquid in his mouth slide down his throat and into his body. She put away the remaining medicinal liquid and gently pressed her palm on his chest. Her spiritual force surged, helping him to unblock his meridians while guiding the spirit liquid he had consumed into every part of his meridians. Over and over again, she forced the black lotus chi in his body down. Then, she used silver needles to seal the acupuncture points on his upper body. She stayed here for the entire night. Because his body was lying on the ice bed, the cold air permeated the air. After one night, she also felt a little cold. She was worried that the cold would hurt the child in her womb. After helping him circulate his chi, she didn't dare to stay for long and first went to the side to regulate her breathing. In these few days, the people of Spirit Immortal City gradually spread the news that the mysterious people who lived in seclusion in the small house at the center of the lake in Spirit Immortal Alley in the southern city district had bought many thousand-year-old spiritual herbs and treasures from the auction house a few days ago. Among them, the black-clothed woman who had killed the Chen family patriarch was from this small house at the center of the lake. Chapter 3761. No one had expected that the owner of the small house in the center of the lake, whom they had almost forgotten, would cause such a commotion at this time. What surprised them even more was that they knew that the owner of the small house in the center of the lake had been killed by the owner of the small house in the center of the lake. They also vaguely knew that the owner of the small house in the center of the lake was a pregnant woman in red. However, no one had ever seen the true face of the woman in red. No one knew what she looked like. No one knew who her husband's family was. No one knew which family she came from. They only knew that the people around her seemed to be very powerful. As for how powerful they were, the people of the various forces in Spirit Immortal City more or less had an idea. Because before this, they had sent people to inquire about it, but none of them had returned. That evening, Fan Lin prepared to return to the small house in the center of the lake after tidying up the medicine house. After all, he had been here for the past few days and had not gone back to see his master and the others. He wanted to find time to go back today. There were not many people in the medicine house, so he went outside and said to Qin Xin, I'm going back. I'll leave the medicine house to you. I'll come over tomorrow morning. Qin Xin, who was flipping through a medical book, looked up at him and said with a smile, No problem, you can go back. You don't have to worry about me here. However, since you're going back today, it's my turn to go back tomorrow. I haven't seen my master for a few days, so I want to go back and see her. Fan Lin smiled, No problem. He glanced at the medical book in her hand, then took out a book from his sleeve and handed it to her, saying, This is a book I specially found. It contains some experience and convenience in midwifery. Take this book and read it. Okay. Qin Xin replied and took the book. The reason she studied medicine was so that she could help her master deliver the baby. After all, Fan Lin was a man, and it was inconvenient for him to be present when her master delivered the baby. She and the midwives could only help her master deliver the baby naturally. However, her master was pregnant with twins this time, so they had to be careful. I'll ask Hui Lang to pass by when we get back, Fan Lin said. He then left through the back door after informing her. Although people in the city were secretly talking about the small house at the center of the lake, very few people knew that some of the forces that had risen in the city in recent months were from the small house at the center of the lake. Others didn't know about their relationship, and they didn't want others to know about it. Therefore, when they returned, they would be careful and try their best to avoid the eyes of others. However, when he left from the secluded path, there were already people watching him and following him. As one of the 8 captains of the Phoenix Guard, Fan Lin's main focus was on medicine. However, he did not fall behind in terms of cultivation. However, if he were to be compared to Gu Mo and the other 6 captains, his combat ability would naturally be inferior. He walked along the small path. Because the place was remote, he did not meet many people. Moreover, he also took a detour and did not go directly to the small house in the center of the lake. Therefore, when he knew that he was being watched, he was already prepared. In the dark, a dozen men in black stared at the elegant man who was walking slowly and frowned. "Are you sure you didn't make a mistake? Is this person really our target?" Chapter 3762. They actually used more than a dozen of us to kill a doctor. "It's really a waste of talent," someone whispered. Someone said in a low voice. They felt that such an elegant doctor, even if he had some cultivation, could be easily taken away by any one of them. However, the organization had sent more than 10 of them here. It was really a waste of talent. "He's finally out after 2 days. Since that's the case, I'll send him on his way," a black-clothed assassin said. He hid in the dark and stared at the slowly walking figure. He raised his hand and aimed it at Fan Lin. He pulled up his sleeve slightly, revealing a sleeve of arrows. The black-clothed man sneered. At the same time he pressed the mechanism, an almost inaudible sharp aura flew out with a murderous aura and shot straight at the back of Fan Lin's head. Whoosh! Fan Lin was still walking slowly. He heard the sound coming from behind him and released his divine sense. When he felt that the attack was only a meter away from him, he turned around unexpectedly. With a flick of his sleeve, an invisible force surged out and deflected the arrow. Whoosh! Hiss! The sharp sleeve arrow turned back with a swoosh. If it was any other time, it would not be difficult for these assassin organizations to avoid it. However, they had all underestimated their enemy. No one thought that the sleeve arrow would be reflected back. Thus, when they reacted, the sleeve arrow had already shot into the black-clothed man's forehead with a swoosh. A trace of blood seeped out and slid down. The black-clothed man's eyes widened in shock. He stared straight ahead. However, his body lost its balance and fell down. Bang! The sound of the corpse falling to the ground woke the others up. The dozen or so people were shocked. They quickly recovered and leaped out to surround Fan Lin. At this moment, the dozen or so top assassins no longer had contempt in their eyes. There was only a strong sense of fear and caution. Kill! As the cold word, kill, fell, the dozen or so figures quickly rushed out. The sharp swords in their hands were gleaming with cold light as they slashed across the ground, splashing cold murderous aura. Fan Lin still had a refined smile on his face. He stretched out the hand in front of him and a long sword slid out from under his sleeve. In the next moment, the long sword in his hand met the attacks of the black-clothed assassins. Clang! Whoosh! Swish! The clanging sound of swords clashing against each other was accompanied by sparks. The murderous aura contained in the sharp sword aura spread out in the air. As a black-clothed assassin was killed, the smell of blood in the air also rushed into his nose. Swish! Under the refraction of the cold sword, a biting cold light flashed, and the sharp sword aura accompanied by the pressure suddenly attacked the black-clothed assassins, shocking them in an instant. It was also at this moment that the shadow of the sword flashed past, and with a strange and unpredictable speed, it slashed across the throat of the black-clothed assassin and sealed his throat. Bang bang bang! Black figures fell to the ground one after another. The assassins in black stared at the scene in front of them with their eyes wide open. It was as if they had never thought that the elegant man was such a cold-faced Rakshasa. When the remaining 2 assassins in black saw this scene, they were so shocked that cold sweat seeped out. They retreated, wanting to escape and tell the organization that this elegant man was simply a god of death. Chapter 3763. A sharp sword stained with blood pierced through their dantian. After the sword pierced through the other person, the force behind the sword retreated and pierced through the other person, piercing the 2 of them together. Blood dripped down from the wound of the sword. There was no trace of blood on the black clothes, but the drops of blood on the ground were dazzling and eye-catching. Fan Lin put one hand behind his back and walked forward step by step until he was in front of the two men. He held the hilt of the sword with one hand and said gently, "I haven't killed anyone for a long time, so I'm a little rusty. I'm sorry to let you die an ugly death." As soon as his voice fell, the sharp sword in his hand was pulled out. At the same time, blood splashed out, and the two men fell to the ground. He wiped the sword in his hand and put it away. Then, he looked at the corpses on the ground. After collecting their belongings, he took out a bottle of medicinal liquid and poured it on the corpses. Sizzle. A sizzling sound was heard, and wisps of smoke rose from the ground. The corpses turned into a pool of blood in front of him, leaving only a pile of clothes on the ground. He suddenly raised his head and looked in a certain direction, revealing an inexplicable smile. The middle-aged man who was following him in the dark felt his heart tremble when he saw this. A chill ran up from the soles of his feet, and he couldn't help but shudder. He knew that he was here. This discovery shocked him to the core. He was a peak immortal venerable expert. Logically speaking, Fan Lin shouldn't have been able to discover him. After all, even those assassins didn't know that he had been following them. However, Fan Lin looked precisely at the place where he was hiding, and even revealed a smile. After seeing him kill people and destroy the corpses, the smile in his eyes was like the smile of the god of death. It was incomparably strange, and made him retreat instinctively, not daring to follow him in the dark anymore. Fan Lin smiled faintly and retracted his gaze. After destroying the corpses, he lowered his head and looked at his robe. When he saw a trace of blood splashed on the hem of his robe, he couldn't help but sigh softly, "I have to go back and take a bath first before I can meet my master." Then, he continued to walk forward leisurely. At the same time, he was calculating the income of the medicinal tower during this period. It was completely different. His smile had frightened a peak immortal venerable expert to the point that he broke out in cold sweat. The middle-aged man, who was frightened by Fan Lin, quickly returned to the mansion with shaky steps. He sat down in the main hall of the mansion, picked up the slightly cold water on the table, and poured himself a cup. After gulping down a few cups of water, he finally calmed down. "Brother He? What's wrong? What's wrong? Why is your face so pale?" A middle-aged man walked in with large strides. Seeing the middle-aged man desperately drinking water and gasping for breath and pale face, he couldn't help but be slightly surprised. "Old Li, the people in this medicine tower are not to be trifled with. It's best if you don't provoke them." The middle-aged man with the surname he said to the other middle-aged man after catching his breath, "Bye." Chapter 3764. But that medicine. We can only look for it again, but we can't start with the people in the medicinal tower. Let's find out more. The man with the surname he patted his shoulder and said, "I'll go back and rest first. I'll be leaving tomorrow." "You're leaving?" The middle-aged man was surprised. "Yes, I came here for the spiritual medicine. Now that the spiritual medicine has fallen into the hands of others, I can only ask around." As he spoke, he did not stay any longer and walked towards the backyard. Others were not like him and did not know how frightened he was at this moment. Even his back was drenched in cold sweat and his palms were cold. Over the past few days, aristocratic families in the city had visited the South City governor to ask about the origins of the owner of the small house in the middle of the lake. Even the West City governor and North City governor had invited him for a drink to find out about the origins of those people. In the governor's mansion, the South City governor looked at the horizon with his hands behind his back. When he thought of the two people who came to the governor's mansion that night, he could not help but sigh softly. He was not the only one who wanted to know who those people were. He also wanted to know who lived in the small house in the middle of the lake. However, they had already agreed not to disturb them unless it was absolutely necessary. When he thought of the miraculous effects of the pill, his eyes flashed. The person who could produce such a pill must have unfathomable power. He knew that he must not become enemies with them. At the same time, after Fan Lin returned to the small house in the middle of the lake, he went to Fengjiu and told her about the medicine he had refined and some things about the medicinal tower. Then, he said, "Master, I heard that someone had seen the Xueling flower in the savage wilderness fearsome lands." Fengjiu, who was flipping through the medicine book, immediately raised her head when she heard this. "There's news about the Xueling flower. Is the news reliable?" "It should be very reliable. I heard about it from the people in the 1st Mercenary Corps. It was said that a family had set their eyes on the Xueling flower. However, the Xueling flower's guardian beast was too powerful. More than 20 people died and they still could not pick the Xueling flower. At that time, the people in the 1st Mercenary Corps were not far away, so they saw the scene." Hearing this, Fengjiu closed the book in her hand and looked at Fan Lin. "Get someone to make the arrangements. I want to go to the savage wilderness." Upon hearing this, even Leng Hua, Leng Shuang, and the others were slightly startled. Leng Hua said, "Master, we can send people to pick the spirit medicine you want. You're pregnant now, so it's not suitable for you to go to that kind of place. Master, you have to take care of the baby." Leng Shuang also spoke up, worried that his master would really go personally. Fengjiu shook his head and smiled. "No one can replace me. I have to go personally." Fan Lin's expression turned serious as he asked, "Master, is there no other way? Can we preserve the Xueling flower and send it back? You're familiar with the medicinal properties and medical knowledge of spirit medicine. You should also know that the Xueling flower can only be harvested when the first ray of sunlight appears in the morning to maximize its medicinal effects. Furthermore, it must be refined into medicine within 2 hours after it's harvested. Otherwise, the medicinal effects will be lost. Another thing is that the Xueling flower blooms only once a year. If we miss this opportunity, we'll have to wait until next year. Master, are you harvesting the Xueling flower to refine the spirit medicine for the Yama Lord?" Leng Hua asked. "Perhaps only the Yama Lord could make his master act this way." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.